The gun barrel pressed cold against Elena's temple, metal on skin, a stark reminder of how quickly hope could transform into desperation. The dim light of the underground chamber cast long shadows across the crumbling, brick walls, illuminating the scattered historical documents at her feet, papers that had lain hidden for over 150 years until she discovered them. "Last chance, Mrs. Carson." Victoria Pembroke's voice echoed in the confined space, her designer suit incongruous against the earthen walls of the hidden chamber. $50,000, cash, tonight, or I call Child Protective Services first thing tomorrow. Elena's hands trembled as she clutched Catherine Blackwood's journal to her chest, the leather binding worn smooth by time and desperate fingers. "These don't belong to you. They don't belong to anyone. They're history." Victoria's laugh was sharp, cutting through the musty air. "History has a price tag, Elena. Tonight, that price is $50,000, or your daughter." One of Victoria's men shifted impatiently, the beam from his flashlight dancing across the centuries-old brick ceiling. "We don't have all night, Miss Pembroke." Elena closed her eyes, seeing Sophie's face, her daughter waiting upstairs in the trailer, innocent and unaware that her future hung in the balance. And 6 weeks earlier, the October rain pounded mercilessly against the windshield as Elena Carson's weathered sedan crawled through the Georgia mud. Each wiper stroke revealed another stretch of desolation. Rusted mailboxes tilting like forgotten sentinels, trailers with patched roofs, and puddles the color of strong coffee swallowing what remained of the gravel road. "Are we there yet, Mommy?" Sophie's small voice carried from the back seat where her wheelchair was carefully secured beside her. Elena glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting her 6-year-old daughter's eyes, Michael's eyes, and forced brightness into her voice. "Almost, sweetheart. Just a little further now." The dashboard clock read 4:47 p.m., but the storm clouds had already stolen the day's remaining light. Elena's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, her wedding ring, the only possession she hadn't pawned, catching what little illumination filtered through the gloom. In her purse lay an envelope containing 300 worn bills, her last 300 in the world. The money she'd saved by skipping meals, by diluting Sophie's apple juice, by washing their clothes in the sink with hand soap, by keeping the thermostat at 60 degrees until their apartment manager had shut off the heat entirely. 300 that would either save them or become the final chapter in their downward spiral. The sign for Riverbank Mobile Home Park emerged from the mist, its letters faded and crooked. Below it, barely legible, "Last stop before nowhere." Someone had tried to paint over this addition, but the pessimistic proclamation refused to disappear completely. Elena eased the car into what passed for a parking area, her tires sinking into mud that seemed determined to claim anything that ventured too close. "Stay here, Sophie. I'll check in with the manager first." The office was a single-wide trailer with an American flag hanging limply from a pole on the tiny porch. A hand-painted sign in the window announced "Office" in bold red letters. Elena knocked, then pushed open the door when a gruff voice called from within. Harold Jenkins sat behind a metal desk, his Vietnam veteran cap pulled low over eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by anything new. A portable heater glowed orange at his feet, fighting the damp chill that seemed to seep through the walls. "You must be Carson," he said, not looking up from the ledger before him. "The teacher?" "Former teacher," Elena corrected gently. "I'm here about the trailer for rent. We spoke on the phone." Jenkins looked up, his weathered face a map of decades lived hard. "Number 17, furthest one back where the property meets the woods." He studied her with narrowed eyes. "You sure about this, lady? Place hasn't been lived in for 2 years. Last tenant left in a hurry." Elena set her jaw. "I'm sure. You said $300 cash in advance." Jenkins nodded slowly. "That I did. No refunds, though. No complaints either. You take it as is." "What happened to the last tenant?" Elena asked, something in his tone triggering the historian in her, the part that listened for the stories between words. Jenkins shifted in his chair, the springs creaking a metallic protest. "Raymond Miller, Iraq vet, 2 tours, came back different like a lot of boys do." He paused, scratching his beard. Started saying he heard voices from under the floor. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Voices? Said they were singing sometimes, crying at other times. Jenkins shrugged. Found him one morning sitting in his truck at 3 a.m., everything he owned packed up. Said he wasn't going back inside for anything in the world. He pulled a key from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. Probably just the wind in the pipes. Old place like that makes noise. But if you're the superstitious type, Elena took the key, its weight somehow greater than its size. I'm not superstitious, Mayor Jenkins. I'm desperate. There's a difference. Across town, in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Atlanta, Victoria Pembroke studied a land survey map, her manicured nail tracing the outline of a property just outside the city limits. The Pembroke Development logo gleamed on the wall behind her desk, a stylized P in gold against black marble. The riverbank acquisition is essential to the shopping complex, Father. She spoke into her phone, her voice measured despite the tension building behind her temples. The additional acreage gives us the setback we need for the environmental permits. You're certain the owner will sell? Thomas Pembroke's voice carried the weight of 4 decades in real estate development. Jenkins has refused every offer for 15 years. Everyone has a price. Victoria turned to her computer, pulling up a spreadsheet of financial projections. His property taxes increased again this year. The trailer park is barely breaking even. I need a win, Victoria. Her father's voice took on an edge she recognized too well. The Charleston project is 6 months behind schedule, and the Miami investors are getting nervous. If you can't deliver Riverbank by the end of the quarter, I'll deliver it. Victoria cut him off, her free hand unconsciously straightening an already perfectly aligned pen on her desk. I have a meeting with the county commissioner tomorrow about rezoning. Once that's approved, Jenkins will see the writing on the wall. After ending the call, Victoria stood at her window, watching rain batter the city. The pressure was mounting. Pembroke Development had overextended on the Charleston project, a fact she'd carefully hidden from the board and from her father. If she couldn't deliver the Riverbank acquisition and the subsequent shopping complex, the company's cash flow problems would become impossible to conceal. Back at the trailer park, Elena helped Sophie into her wheelchair, then covered her with a raincoat as they made the treacherous journey to the trailer's door. It's not much, Elena said, fighting to keep the apology from her voice as they entered, but we'll make it ours. Sophie wheeled herself slowly around the main room, taking in their new circumstances with the uncanny perceptiveness she'd developed since the accident. It's okay, Mom. We're together. That's what matters. Over the next hour, Elena brought in their meager possessions. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of Sophie's books and toys, Elena's teaching materials she couldn't bear to part with, and the small cooler containing their food supplies. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, and the night had fully claimed the sky by the time she made her final trip to the car. While Sophie sorted her books onto a small shelf, Elena examined the trailer more thoroughly. The bathroom pipes groaned but worked. The refrigerator hummed to life when plugged in. The stove had only 2 functional burners, but that was 2 more than they'd had in the motel last week. She saved the soft spots in the floor for last, kneeling to press her hand against the worst area in what would be Sophie's room. The carpet was unsalvageable, reeking of mildew and worse. Elena began pulling it up, starting at the edge where it had already separated from the wall. As she worked, she found more of Raymond's notebooks scattered beneath the furniture and along the baseboards. This one labeled simply, Below. April 17th, found historical records at library. This land was once part of Blackwood Plantation. Colonel Josiah Blackwood, one of Georgia's wealthiest slaveholders, over 250 slaves before Sherman's march. Coincidence? April 22nd, floor getting softer. Something underneath, not dirt, not the trailer undercarriage, something else. April 25th, dreamed of people running through darkness, lanterns, whispers. Woke up to sounds of chains rattling. 2:44 a.m. Elena set the notebook aside, her historian's mind whirring. Blackwood Plantation. She froze, a sudden recognition washing over her. Blackwood, not just any plantation, the Blackwood Plantation, the subject of her unfinished master's thesis. The plantation with rumors of an extensive underground railroad connection, though no physical evidence had ever been found. Elena had spent 2 years researching Blackwood before Michael's death had derailed her academic career. She'd combed through every historical record, every diary and letter she could access. She'd been particularly fascinated by the plantation owner's wife, Catherine Blackwood, who had disappeared after the war with rumors that she had secretly aided escaping slaves. Could this trailer park really sit on what was once Blackwood land? A loud crack interrupted her thoughts as her hand suddenly broke through a particularly soft section of floor. The plywood subfloor had crumbled like wet cardboard, revealing a dark space beneath. Elena jerked her hand back, heart pounding. Mom, Sophie called from the other room. What was that? Nothing, baby, just some old floor. Stay there. Okay. Elena shone her phone's flashlight into the hole, expecting to see dirt or the trailer's undercarriage. Instead, the beam disappeared into darkness, a space much deeper than the crawl space that should be there. She pulled away more of the rotted wood, adrenaline temporarily overcoming her exhaustion. The hole widened to reveal what appeared to be deliberately cut edges, not random rot, but a purposefully created opening that had been covered over. Within minutes, she'd exposed a 3-foot square opening with the remains of metal hinges still attached to one side. A trap door, and below, illuminated by her phone's light, wooden steps descended into darkness. Sophie, Elena called, her voice unsteady. I need you to stay in the living room for a bit longer. Why, what did you find? I'm not sure yet. Just give me a few minutes. Elena's mind raced. She should call someone. The authorities, a university, anyone who could properly document what might be a historical find. But the practical part of her, the part that had been counting pennies and choosing which medications they could afford this month, whispered, look first. Understand what you have before others take it from you. The first step creaked but held her weight. The air rising from below smelled of earth and age, carrying a heaviness that felt like history itself. 7 steps down, each taking her further from the present day and deeper into something forgotten. The chamber at the bottom was roughly 8 feet square, with walls of handmade brick, the irregular, slightly misshapen kind that dated to before the Civil War. The floor was hard-packed dirt, and the ceiling low enough that Elena had to stoop slightly, but it was what lined the walls that made her breath catch. Shelves had been built into the brick, not crude planks, but carefully constructed storage. Most were empty, but some held objects that had somehow survived the decades. Metal boxes spotted with rust, glass bottles with faded paper labels, ceramic containers, and in one corner, wrapped in what looked like oilcloth, several bundles. Elena approached the largest bundle with trembling hands. The oilcloth cracked at her touch but had done its job protecting what lay within. A leather portfolio containing papers and documents. Her phone's light caught faded ink, and she made out a date, April 12th, 1863. She sank to her knees in the dirt, carefully spreading the papers on the ground. The first was a map, hand-drawn with meticulous detail, showing the local area with names she didn't recognize, except one. Blackwood Plantation was clearly marked, and lines led from it to various points north, each marked with symbols she couldn't decipher. The second document made her hands tremble. My dearest Martha, the terminal beneath the Blackwood house remains secure despite increased patrols. 23 souls passed through last month, bound for the northern lines, 11 men, 7 women, and 5 children. The youngest just turned 4 years. The new overseer suspects nothing, though we must remain vigilant. The codes have changed again. 3 knocks, pause. 2 knocks, pause. 1 knock. The response must be, the river flows north when the moon is dark. I pray this war ends soon so we might live without these necessary deceptions. How much longer must we pretend loyalty to a cause we abhor while risking our lives for the truth we hold dear? Your devoted brother, Thomas. Elena's breath came in short gasps. A terminal, the Underground Railroad. Here, beneath what was now a rusted trailer in a forgotten corner of Georgia, people had risked everything to ferry escaped slaves to freedom. More documents revealed themselves as she carefully unwrapped the bundles. Lists of names, Moses, Ruth, Samuel, Mary, with dates beside them and destinations, Ohio, Michigan, Canada. Some entries were marked with crosses, and Elena's heart clenched as she realized these indicated those who hadn't made it. One ledger contained detailed records. June 3rd, 1863. Solomon and family, wife Ruth, children aged 4 and 7, arrived in poor health. Ruth's feet badly injured from walking, treated with tincture and wrapped. Hid here 6 days until patrol passed. Successfully moved to Thompson Station. June 19th, 1863. Mary and infant son arrived. Baby coughing badly, dangerous to move. Catherine, Mrs. Blackwood, visited under pretense of inspecting quarters. Brought medicine hidden in sewing basket. Both recovered. Moved north July 2nd. Catherine Blackwood, the plantation owner's wife, had been part of the Underground Railroad. She'd risked not just her social standing, but her life to help escape slaves. Among the papers, Elena found a small leather-bound journal. The handwriting was different, more feminine, more hurried. I cannot reconcile the man I married with the cause he serves. Josiah speaks of property rights and state sovereignty while human beings suffer in our fields. When this war ends, and pray God it ends with freedom for all, I will confess my activities. Until then, this chamber serves God's work, not man's law. It was signed simply CB. Another entry made Elena's eyes blur with tears. Tonight, a girl no older than 10 arrived alone. She had walked from the Harrison plantation 20 miles through swamp and forest. Her back bore fresh whip marks. As I treated her wounds, she sang softly, a song her mother had taught her, the same lullaby I sing to my own children. How can Josiah not see? How can any of them not see? We are all God's children. Mom, Sophie's voice called from above, snapping Elena back to the present. You've been gone forever. Are you okay? Elena carefully returned the documents to their wrappers, her mind spinning with implications. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a full station on the Underground Railroad, complete with medical supplies, detailed records, and evidence of a network that had saved dozens, possibly hundreds of lives. I'm coming, sweetheart, she called, climbing the worn steps with care. I found something important. Back in the trailer, Sophie waited in her wheelchair, her small face etched with concern. What did you find, Mom? Is it buried treasure? Elena knelt in front of her daughter, trying to translate the magnitude of the discovery into terms a 6-year-old could understand. In a way, yes, but not gold or jewels. It's a special hiding place from a long time ago, a place where brave people helped others escape to freedom. Sophie's eyes widened. Like in my history book? The underground trains? The Underground Railroad. Yes, exactly like that, but it wasn't really a train. It was a secret network of people in hiding places. And one of those hiding places is right under our floor. Sophie wheeled closer to the hole, peering into the darkness with undisguised curiosity. Can I see it? Elena hesitated. The wooden stairs were too steep and narrow for Sophie's wheelchair, and the chamber itself wasn't exactly sanitary. Not yet, baby. It needs to be made safe first, but I promise, you'll get to see it. That night, after tucking Sophie into bed on the sagging couch, the only furniture that seemed structurally sound enough to trust, Elena sat at the wobbly kitchen table, Raymond Miller's notebook spread before her. She'd found a dozen more, detailing his growing obsession with the voices beneath the floor. His early entries were skeptical, clinical almost. But as the weeks progressed, his handwriting grew more erratic, his theories more elaborate. April 30th, it's not ghosts, too regular, too purposeful. What if it's recordings? What if someone hid technology down there, military conspiracy? May 5th, sleep deprivation affecting judgment. Haven't told anyone at VA. They'll think PTSD getting worse. But I'm not crazy. This is real. His final entry, dated just days before Jenkins said he'd fled in the night. They're calling to me, not voices from the past, voices in the past. Time isn't linear, it spirals, overlaps. Those people are still there, still hiding, still afraid, and they can sense me. God help me, they know I'm here. Elena closed the notebook, feeling a strange kinship with Raymond Miller. He'd heard something he couldn't explain, and it had terrified him enough to abandon everything. But what he'd perceived as supernatural, she recognized as historical. The voices weren't ghosts. They were echoes, impressions left in the collective memory of a place that had witnessed both tremendous suffering and remarkable courage. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then dialed a number she hadn't called in over a year. History department, this is Dr. Hamilton. Margaret, it's Elena. Elena Carson. A pause, then warm recognition. Elena, my God, it's been, what, since Michael's memorial? How are you? How's Sophie? We're surviving. Elena took a deep breath. Listen, I need your expertise. I've found something significant. As concisely as possible, Elena described the chamber, the documents, the connection to Blackwood Plantation. Dr. Margaret Hamilton, her former advisor and mentor, listened without interruption, though Elena could hear her quickened breathing through the phone. Elena, if what you're describing is authentic, and from your description of the brickwork and documents, it sounds like it is, this could be the find of the decade. The Blackwood Underground Railroad station has been rumored for years, but no physical evidence had ever been found. I know, I wrote half my thesis on it. Where exactly are you? Elena gave her the address of the trailer park. Riverbank? Wait, isn't that property being developed? What do you mean? I saw something in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution last week. Some development company is planning a shopping complex in that area, Pembroke, I think. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the trailer's poor insulation. What would that mean for the site? Nothing good. These developers aren't exactly known for their historical preservation efforts. Dr. Hamilton's voice took on a note of urgency. Elena, you need to secure that site. Document everything. Photographs, measurements, exact locations of every artifact. Don't move anything if you can help it. I'll come first thing tomorrow morning. After ending the call, Elena returned to the hole in the floor, staring down into the darkness. The historian in her thrilled at the discovery, but the practical mother felt the first stirrings of anxiety. If developers were already eyeing the property, how long before bulldozers threatened not just the historical site, but their tenuous new home? The next morning dawned gray and misty, the kind of Georgia autumn day where the boundary between earth and sky blurred into a single watercolor wash. Elena woke early, having slept fitfully on a thin camping mattress beside Sophie's makeshift bed. Her body ached from the previous day's exertions, but her mind raced with purpose. She made breakfast from their meager supplies, instant oatmeal thinned with extra water, the last of a jar of applesauce divided carefully between two bowls. Sophie ate without complaint, her eyes continually drifting to the covered hole in what would be her bedroom. Are we going to explore more today? Dr. Hamilton is coming to help us. She knows all about historical sites like this. Is she nice? Elena smiled, remembering her mentor's fierce intelligence and equally fierce loyalty. Very nice, and very smart. She was my teacher a long time ago. Before Daddy died? The question, delivered with a child's innocent directness, caught Elena off guard. Yes, baby, before Daddy died. Sophie nodded solemnly. I'm going to show her my history journal. After breakfast, Elena helped Sophie dress, then tackled the impossible task of making the trailer presentable. She gathered Raymond Miller's scattered notebooks into a neat stack, wiped down the grimy counters, and covered the worst water stains with their few belongings, strategically arranged. Outside, she found scraps of wood behind the maintenance shed and cobbled together a crude ramp over the trailer's two steps. It wasn't pretty, but it would allow Sophie to wheel herself in and out independently, a small dignity that meant everything to her fiercely independent daughter. As she worked, Elena became aware of a sleek black SUV cruising slowly through the trailer park, clearly out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and ancient sedans. It passed by their trailer twice before parking near the front office. Elena watched from behind a weather-beaten lawn chair as a woman in a tailored suit emerged, her high heels sinking slightly into the muddy ground. Even from a distance, Elena could see the woman's displeasure as she picked her way toward Jenkins' office. Something about her purposeful stride and the impatient tap of her fingers against her leather portfolio screamed authority and money, two things in notably short supply at Riverbank. Elena returned to her task, but her historian's curiosity was piqued. A well-dressed stranger at a neglected trailer park might be coincidence, but combined with Dr. Hamilton's mention of development plans, it felt ominous. She finished securing the ramp with a length of frayed rope, then went inside to check on Sophie. Her daughter had arranged her stuffed animals, survivors of numerous pawnshop cullings, into a semicircle on the floor and was teaching them history, her leather journal open on her lap. This is where brave people hid, Sophie explained to a one-eyed teddy bear. They were running away from mean people who thought they could own them, which is silly because you can't own people. Elena leaned against the door frame, her heart swelling despite their circumstances. For all they'd lost, Sophie's capacity for empathy and understanding remained intact, perhaps even heightened by their own struggles. A sharp knock at the door interrupted the lesson. Elena tensed, expecting Jenkins with some overlooked detail about the rental agreement. Instead, she opened the door to find the woman from the SUV standing on their makeshift porch, her expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. Mrs. Carson, I'm Victoria Pembroke of Pembroke Development. She extended a manicured hand. May I come in? I'd like to discuss a matter of potential mutual benefit. Elena hesitated, then stepped aside. Victoria's eyes took in the trailer's interior with clinical precision, cataloging the water stains, the sagging furniture, the patches of exposed subfloor. If she was disgusted, she hid it well. I'll be direct, Mrs. Carson. Our company is developing a retail complex in this area. Riverbank Mobile Home Park is integral to our plans. I'm just renting. You should speak with Mr. Jenkins. Victoria smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. Oh, we've been negotiating with Mr. Jenkins for months. He's stubborn, but that's not why I'm here. She set her portfolio on the kitchen table. I understand you just moved in yesterday. Elena nodded, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. The hole in the floor hastily covered with a threadbare rug, Sophie watching wide-eyed from the living room. Moving is expensive and disruptive, especially with a child. Victoria's gaze flickered to Sophie, then back to Elena. Given the condition of this unit, I'd like to make you an offer. Pembroke Development will pay you $10,000 to relocate to more suitable accommodations. Elena blinked, the figure momentarily robbing her of speech. $10,000. It would pay for months of rent somewhere decent, maybe even a down payment on a small condo. It would cover Sophie's medications, physical therapy, new clothes, proper food. That's generous, she managed finally. We believe in fair compensation. The funds would be available immediately, today if you prefer, with no obligation beyond vacating this unit within 48 hours. Sophie wheeled closer, her small face serious. But Mom, what about the secret room? The people who hid there? Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. Secret room? Elena placed a protective hand on Sophie's shoulder. My daughter has an active imagination. Loves history. I see. Victoria's gaze lingered on Sophie's wheelchair, then shifted to the covered area of the floor. Well, my offer stands, $10,000 cash for immediate relocation. She withdrew a business card from her jacket pocket. Think it over, but not too long. This is a one-time courtesy extended because of your situation. After Victoria left, Elena stood motionless in the center of the trailer, the business card clutched in her hand. $10,000. An escape from this decaying trailer, from the struggle of stretching every dollar, from the constant worry about Sophie's medical needs. But at what cost? Mom? Sophie's voice was small. Are we going to leave the history people? Elena knelt beside her daughter's wheelchair. I don't know yet, sweetheart. That's a lot of money and it would help us in many ways. But the people in the secret room trusted us to find them. If we leave, who will tell their stories? Out of the mouths of babes. Elena hugged Sophie close, marveling at her daughter's instinctive understanding of what truly mattered. Before she could respond, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Dr. Margaret Hamilton, looking exactly as Elena remembered. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun, sensible shoes, and the perpetual expression of someone whose mind was working faster than the world around her. Elena, Dr. Hamilton embraced her former student warmly. And this must be Sophie. I've heard so much about you, young lady. Sophie beamed. Are you the history doctor? That's right. Your mom tells me you've made quite a discovery. As Elena led Dr. Hamilton to the exposed trapdoor, she recounted Victoria Pembroke's visit and offer. Her mentor's expression darkened. Pembroke Development. I should have known. Thomas Pembroke has a reputation for acquiring historically significant properties, extracting valuable artifacts for private collections, then developing the land. The historical community has been trying to catch him in the act for years. You think that's why they're targeting this property? They know about the Underground Railroad connection? Dr. Hamilton knelt by the trap door, examining the wooden steps. It's possible, or they may just want the land, and you've accidentally discovered why it's particularly valuable to them. She straightened, her expression resolute. Either way, we need to document this site properly before they find a way to destroy it. For the next several hours, Elena and Dr. Hamilton methodically photographed, measured, and cataloged the underground chamber and its contents. Sophie appointed herself research assistant, carefully labeling specimen bags and recording observations in her leather journal. Dr. Hamilton treated the girl with the same professional respect she would show a colleague, asking for her opinions and praising her careful notes. The brickwork is definitely pre-Civil War, Dr. Hamilton confirmed, examining the walls with a small flashlight. And these ventilation shafts, see how they're disguised to look like drainage? Ingenious. They would have prevented suffocation while keeping the chamber undetectable. Elena pointed to a small opening near the floor. What about this? It seems different from the others. Dr. Hamilton brushed away decades of dirt, revealing a narrow tunnel barely 2 feet in diameter. My God, Elena, I think this is an escape route. a secondary exit in case the main one was discovered. Where does it lead? Hard to say without excavation, possibly to the woods behind the property, or maybe to another building that no longer exists. As they worked, Elena found herself glancing frequently at her phone. Victoria Pembroke's business card propped beside it. $10,000. Freedom from financial worry, at least temporarily. But at what cost to history? To the stories of those who had passed through this chamber? By late afternoon, Dr. Hamilton had filled a digital memory card with photographs in several notebooks with observations. This is unquestionably one of the most significant Underground Railroad discoveries in decades. The documentation alone, names, dates, destinations, it's unprecedented. What happens now? I'll submit an emergency application to the National Register of Historic Places. Once it's listed, the site will have legal protection. Dr. Hamilton's expression turned grim. But that process takes time, and if Pembroke Development knows what's here, they'll move quickly. How quickly? Bulldozers in the night, quickly. I've seen it before. She placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. I know 10,000 is a fortune in your situation, but what you found here, it's priceless. After Dr. Hamilton left, promising to return the next day with university colleagues and proper archaeological equipment, Elena sat with Sophie at the kitchen table, attempting to process the day's revelations. What are we going to do, Mom? I don't know yet, sweetheart. Dr. Hamilton thinks this place is very important to history, but that money would help us so much. Sophie considered this, her young face serious beyond her years. Daddy always said doing the right thing isn't the same as doing the easy thing. Elena smiled sadly. Michael had indeed lived by that principle, right up until it had cost him his life, rushing back into a burning building to save strangers. A car door slammed outside, interrupting her thoughts. Through the grimy window, Elena saw Jenkins trudging toward their trailer, his weathered face set in grim lines. She met him at the door. Got a call from Pembroke, he said without preamble. Said they made you an offer. They did. $10,000 to leave. Jenkins nodded, unsurprised. They've been after this land for months. Offered me a fortune, too. He glanced past her to where Sophie sat. Here you found something under the floor. Elena hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Yes, something historical. Underground Railroad. When Elena's eyes widened in surprise, Jenkins shrugged. Miller wasn't the first tenant to hear things. Been stories about this place for decades. Nobody believed them, or nobody wanted to. Why are you telling me this? Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. Because Pembroke doesn't just want to build a shopping center. Word is they're hunting artifacts, rare ones, valuable ones. He lowered his voice. And they don't care how they get them. You know this for certain? My cousin works security for one of their sites in Charleston. Saw them bulldoze an old church foundation at 2 a.m., right after some professor started asking questions about its history. He fixed Elena with a steady gaze. Whatever you found down there, they want it, and they'll get it, one way or another. After Jenkins left, Elena stood in the doorway, watching the sun sink behind the line of trees that marked the property's edge. The same trees that might once have concealed escaped slaves on their desperate journey north. The same trees that now might hide developers waiting for darkness to destroy evidence of that journey. She returned to the trap door, descending once more into the chamber. In the fading light from her phone, the brick walls seemed to pulse with untold stories, with whispered fears and desperate hopes. This place had been a sanctuary, a brief moment of safety in a perilous journey toward freedom. Elena knelt in the dirt floor, running her fingers over the rough bricks. One felt different, smoother, slightly recessed. She pressed gently, and to her astonishment, the brick moved, revealing a small cavity behind it. Inside lay a leather pouch, its surface cracked with age. With trembling fingers, Elena opened it, gasping as gold coins spilled into her palm. 5 of them, each stamped with dates from the 1850s. Beneath the coins was a folded note, the ink faded but still legible. For the final journey north, Godspeed to freedom, CB. Catherine Blackwood had hidden emergency funds for the escaping slaves. Money that might mean the difference between capture and freedom, between life and death. Elena stared at the coins, their weight in her hand both physical and metaphorical. In today's market, these coins would be worth far more than Victoria Pembroke's offer, possibly tens of thousands of dollars. Enough to secure a real home for Sophie, to pay for her medical treatments, to rebuild their lives. But they weren't Elena's to take. These coins had been left for a sacred purpose, entrusted to the earth until they could fulfill their intended mission. To remove them for personal gain would be to betray that trust, to dishonor the very history she'd spent her career studying. As she carefully returned the coins to their hiding place, a realization struck her with stunning clarity. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery, it was a reckoning, a moment when past and present collided in a test of character. Catherine Blackwood had risked everything, her marriage, her social standing, her very life, to help strangers escape bondage. What would that remarkable woman think of Elena if she abandoned this site for money, if she chose comfort over preservation? Footsteps above broke her reverie, too heavy to be Sophie's. Elena quickly replaced the loose brick and climbed the wooden steps, emerging from the trapdoor to find a man standing in the center of the trailer. Tall, African-American, mid-40s, wearing a university windbreaker. "Mrs. Carson, I'm Dr. William Lawrence from the Atlanta History Center. Margaret Hamilton called me, said I needed to see this immediately." Elena hesitated. She didn't mention anyone else was coming. "She's stuck in traffic, construction on I-75. She asked me to come ahead, start the preliminary assessment." He showed his credentials. "I specialize in antebellum archaeology and underground railroad sites. If this is what Margaret thinks it is, you've made a discovery that could rewrite textbooks." His excitement seemed genuine and his credentials checked out. Elena led him inside, watching his face change as she revealed the entrance to the chamber. "My God," he breathed. "The construction alone, this is definitely period correct." He looked at her with something approaching awe. "You found this yesterday?" "The floor was rotted when I pulled up the carpet." Elena gestured helplessly. "I'm a history teacher." "Was. I knew it was significant." Dr. Lawrence descended carefully, his excitement palpable. Elena followed, watching as he examined the walls, the shelves, the artifacts she'd carefully replaced. "The brick pattern is consistent with 1840s construction," he murmured. "These torch brackets, hand-forged iron, and the layout." He turned in a slow circle. "This matches descriptions from the Caldwell letters." "Caldwell letters?" "Private correspondence between Underground Railroad conductors. Jeremiah Caldwell mentioned a secure room beneath Blackwood's very feet, but historians assumed it was metaphorical." His hands shook as he photographed the chamber. "May I see the documents?" Elena showed him the wrapped bundles, watching as he carefully examined the papers with gloved hands she hadn't noticed him put on. "Catherine Blackwood," he said softly. "We suspected she was sympathetic to the cause, but this proves she was an active conductor." He looked up at Elena, his expression a mixture of awe and calculation. "Do you understand what this means? The wife of one of Georgia's largest slave owners was secretly helping slaves escape. The courage that must have taken." Something in his tone set off a warning bell in Elena's mind. His assessment was professional, his knowledge evident, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that seemed excessive. Her phone rang. "Dr. Hamilton," Elena said, answering quickly. "Elena, whatever you do, don't let anyone into that chamber. There's something you need to know about Pembroke Development. They're not just building a shopping center. They're specifically acquiring historic properties. There's been speculation about—" The line crackled with static. "Margaret? Margaret?" Elena looked at her phone. No signal. That was odd. She'd had 3 bars a moment ago. "Problem?" Dr. Lawrence asked, still examining documents. "Phone died." Before she could say more, a woman descended the steps. Victoria Pembroke. But her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the fake warmth, replaced by cold efficiency. "Mrs. Carson," Victoria's voice was flat. "I apologize for the deception, but when Harold mentioned you'd found something in the floor, well, we had to act quickly." "You're not from the History Center," Elena said to Lawrence, though it wasn't a question. "Oh, I am," he replied carefully, setting down the documents. "I just have a more flexible arrangement with certain parties. Pembroke Development funds my research in exchange for first rights to significant finds." Victoria smiled thinly. "These artifacts will be preserved, Mrs. Carson. Privately, but preserved. And you'll be well compensated. $50,000 for your silence and cooperation. That's enough for a real home for your daughter, proper medical care, a fresh start." The amount momentarily stole Elena's breath. $50,000, it could change everything for them. But as she looked at Catherine Blackwood's journal in Lawrence's hands, at the chamber that had sheltered so many desperate souls, she knew there was only one answer. Absolutely not. These artifacts belong in a museum available to everyone. The stories of the people who passed through here deserve to be told, to be honored, not locked away in some billionaire's private collection. Victoria's eyes narrowed. People will know what we decide they should know, Mrs. Carson. Dr. Lawrence here will authenticate select pieces. A nice story about Pembroke Corporation's commitment to preserving history. Everyone wins. Get out, Elena said quietly. Both of you. Now. Dr. Lawrence looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Carson, you don't understand. Pembroke has been tracking potential Underground Railroad sites for years. The shopping center is just cover. They're assembling a private collection that exploits history for profit, Elena finished, reduces courage and sacrifice to commodity. Get out. Victoria's face hardened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I offered you a fortune. Remember that when you're evicted for code violations, when Child Services questions whether a mold-infested trailer is suitable for a disabled child, is that a threat? A new voice, older, authoritative. Dr. Margaret Hamilton descended the steps, and she wasn't alone. Behind her were two uniformed police officers and a man in a National Park Service jacket. Sorry I'm late, Dr. Hamilton said to Elena. I made some calls on the way. She fixed Victoria with a stare that could freeze blood. Miss Pembroke, I believe you're familiar with the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. Attempting to remove artifacts from a potential National Historic Site is a federal crime. This is private property, Victoria protested, which may soon be subject to federal protection. The Park Service official stepped forward. Agent Ramirez, National Park Service. Dr. Hamilton contacted us about a significant discovery. I'll need both of you to leave while we secure the site. Dr. Lawrence set down the document he had been holding. This is all a misunderstanding. I was simply conducting a preliminary. Save it for your review board, Dr. Hamilton snapped. I've already contacted the university. Your flexible arrangements are about to become very public. As Victoria and Lawrence were escorted out, Elena sank onto the bottom step, adrenaline leaving her shaky. You okay? Dr. Hamilton asked, sitting beside her. That escalated quickly. Welcome to the world of historic preservation. Big money, competing interests, and occasional criminals. She looked around the chamber with wonder. But Elena, this is extraordinary. Better than I imagined. Agent Ramirez was photographing everything. We'll need to bring in a full archaeological team. This site will need protection while we process the National Register application. He turned to Elena, his expression respectful. Mrs. Carson, you may have found one of the most intact Underground Railroad stations in the South. What does that mean for us? Elena asked. My daughter and I, It means, Dr. Hamilton said gently, that you're about to become caretakers of a national treasure. There are grants, federal funds for site preservation. Universities will want to fund research here. Museums will compete for exhibition rights. She squeezed Elena's hand. You did the right thing calling me. They climbed back to the trailer where Sophie waited, eyes wide. Mom, were those bad people? No, baby, just confused people. But these are friends. Elena introduced Dr. Hamilton and Agent Ramirez, watching Sophie relax at their warm manner. Your mom's a hero, Dr. Hamilton told Sophie. She found something very important. I know, Sophie said proudly. She's good at finding important things. She found my dad when everyone else gave up looking. Elena's eyes filled. After Michael's accident, when the other car had left the scene, she'd spent weeks working with police, tracking down witnesses until they'd found the drunk driver. She'd never realized Sophie had understood her determination. Well, Agent Ramirez said, we need to establish a perimeter. This is now a protected archaeological site. He smiled at Sophie. This is your home. We'll just make sure it's very well protected. As the sun set over Riverbank Trailer Park, Elena stood in the doorway of their dilapidated trailer, watching government vehicles arrive, archaeological equipment being unloaded, security perimeters established. In 24 hours, their lives had transformed completely. From the bedroom, she'd heard Sophie chattering excitedly to Dr. Hamilton about the history people who had hidden beneath their floor. The historian was answering each question with the same seriousness she would afford a colleague, validating Sophie's natural curiosity. Elena fingered the loose brick she'd discovered, the one concealing Catherine Blackwood's gold coins. She hadn't mentioned that particular discovery to anyone, not yet. Some things needed to be approached with proper reverence, with the right timing. In that moment, Elena felt a strange kinship with Catherine Blackwood, another woman who had kept secrets beneath floorboards, who had made difficult choices based on conscience rather than convenience. Separated by more than 150 years, their lives had nonetheless intersected in this unlikely place, this last chance trailer at the edge of nowhere. Perhaps that was the true power of history, not just the artifacts and documents, but the human connections that transcended time, the moments when past and present aligned to illuminate a path forward. Elena had arrived with 300 and a desperate hope for shelter. What she'd found instead was purpose, a chance to preserve stories that might otherwise be lost, a way to honor those who had risked everything for freedom. And in doing so, perhaps she and Sophie had found their own path to freedom as well, not just from financial hardship, but from the hollowness that had haunted them since Michael's death. As night fell fully over Georgia, Elena gazed up at the stars, the same stars that had guided countless souls along the Underground Railroad. In the distance, she could see Victoria Pembroke's SUV still parked at the edge of the property, its occupant presumably on the phone with superiors, plotting the corporation's next move. The battle for this small piece of history was just beginning. But for the first time in 2 years, Elena felt ready to fight, not just for survival, but for something larger than herself, something that mattered. The October sunrise painted the Georgia sky in watercolor strokes of amber and rose, its gentle light softening the shabby contours of Riverbank Trailer Park. Elena Carson stood on the rickety porch of trailer number 17, clutching a chipped mug of instant coffee, watching as a team of archaeologists carefully mapped the area surrounding their unexpected home. Yellow caution tape formed a perimeter around the trailer, and 2 uniformed park rangers stood at attention near the makeshift security checkpoint that had been established overnight. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Victoria Pembroke. 3 whirlwind days that had transformed their desperate last stop into the center of a historical preservation effort. The National Park Service had moved with surprising speed, establishing preliminary protection for the site while the National Register application was expedited. Dr. Hamilton had leveraged her considerable academic influence, bringing in specialists from 3 universities to document the underground chamber and its contents. "Mom, Dr. Hamilton needs your help with the journal," Sophie called from inside, her voice bright with excitement. Elena's daughter had blossomed in the midst of the activity, appointing herself junior historian and shadowing the archaeological team with earnest dedication. For a child who had endured so much loss and hardship, the sudden infusion of purpose was like watching a wilted plant revive after rainfall. Inside the trailer, Dr. Hamilton sat at their wobbly kitchen table, Catherine Blackwood's leather journal open before her, a digital camera and specialized lighting equipment positioned carefully above it. "I'm trying to decipher this passage," she explained, pointing to a faded section where the ink had blurred with age. "Catherine mentions a secondary passage beneath the willow, but I can't make out the directional details." Elena leaned closer, squinting at the familiar handwriting. After 3 days of intensive study, she felt a growing connection to Catherine Blackwood, not just as a historical figure, but as a woman who had maintained a double life, balancing terrible risks with unwavering conviction. "I think it says east of the creek bed, marked by 3 stones set in triangle formation," Elena suggested, tracing the faint words with her finger hovering just above the delicate paper. Dr. Hamilton adjusted her glasses. "Yes, I see it now, which means there might be another entrance to the tunnel system somewhere on the property." She made a notation in her own journal, her handwriting precise and methodical. "We'll need to survey the eastern section, near where that small stream cuts through the woods." Sophie wheeled herself closer, her leather-bound journal, Michael's last gift, open on her lap. "I drew a map," she announced, displaying a carefully rendered diagram of the trailer park with X marks indicating potential tunnel locations. The voices Mr. Miller heard were strongest here, here, and here. Dr. Hamilton examined the child's work with genuine interest. "Excellent deduction, Ovi. We'll add these to our survey points." She glanced at Elena with a smile. "Your daughter has a natural aptitude for historical investigation." A knock at the door interrupted their session. Agent Ramirez entered, his expression more serious than usual. "Mrs. Carson, we have a situation. Victoria Pembroke is back, with company, her father this time." Elena's stomach tightened. "What do they want?" "They're requesting a meeting. Thomas Pembroke claims he has information relevant to the site that he's willing to share, on certain conditions. Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Hamilton, whose expression had hardened at the mention of Thomas Pembroke. "I've dealt with Thomas before," Dr. Hamilton said quietly. "He's more dangerous than his daughter, smoother, more strategic. If he's here personally, something significant is at stake. Should I refuse to meet with him?" Dr. Hamilton considered. "No, knowledge is power, and we need to understand what they're planning. But don't meet alone. I'll come with you." "And me," Sophie insisted, straightening in her wheelchair. Elena knelt beside her daughter. "Not this time, sweetheart. These are people who threatened us, remember? I need you to stay with Agent Ramirez where it's safe." After securing Sophie's reluctant agreement, Elena and Dr. Hamilton walked to the trailer park office where the Pembrokes waited. Jenkins hovered awkwardly nearby, his weathered face a mask of discomfort. Thomas Pembroke rose as they entered, a tall, distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything Elena owned. Victoria stood slightly behind him, her expression carefully neutral, though Elena detected a tightness around her eyes that suggested tension. "Mrs. Carson," Thomas Pembroke extended his hand, which Elena briefly shook. "Dr. Hamilton, it's been some time. Charleston, wasn't it?" "The McGilvery House," Dr. Hamilton replied coolly. "The 18th century mansion that mysteriously caught fire the night before the Preservation Society was to inspect it." Thomas's smile didn't falter. "A tragic accident, as the investigation confirmed." He gestured to the chairs. "Shall we?" Once seated, Thomas opened a leather portfolio similar to his daughter's. "I'll be direct. Victoria's approach the other day was regrettably heavy-handed. We at Pembroke Development have the utmost respect for historical preservation, when it's warranted." Threatening a single mother with child services seemed respectful, Elena noted, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Thomas shot his daughter a sharp glance, an unfortunate overstep, for which I personally apologize. He turned back to Elena. "But I'm here to offer a more productive solution, one that serves everyone's interests." "We're listening," Dr. Hamilton said, her tone making it clear she expected little of value. Thomas extracted a document from his portfolio. "Pembroke Development is prepared to fund a complete archaeological survey of the site, nearly $500,000 in professional services. In exchange, we would partner with the historical preservation effort, incorporating the Underground Railroad station as a centerpiece within our development." "You want to build a shopping mall around a historical site?" Elena asked incredulously. "A historical and educational complex," Thomas corrected smoothly. "The chamber would be preserved in situ, with a museum built above it. Retail spaces would occupy the remainder of the property, with a percentage of all revenues dedicated to ongoing preservation and educational programs." Dr. Hamilton's eyes narrowed. "And ownership of the artifacts?" "Shared. The most significant pieces would remain on public display. Others would rotate between the museum and our corporate collection." "And Mrs. Carson and her daughter?" Dr. Hamilton pressed. Thomas turned to Elena, his expression carefully calibrated to project sincerity. "A permanent position as site historian, with a very competitive salary and benefits package, including health insurance that would cover your daughter's medical needs. Plus housing, we would construct a suitable home for you adjacent to the museum." The offer hung in the air, its implications slowly unfolding in Elena's mind. A real job, health insurance, a proper home for Sophie. After 2 years of struggling just to survive, the prospect of stability was almost overwhelming. But underneath Thomas Pembroke's polished proposal, Elena sensed the same fundamental issue that had tainted Victoria's original offer. Control. The Pembrokes wanted to own this history, to curate which stories were told and how. "Why this sudden interest in partnership?" Elena asked. 3 days ago, your daughter was trying to buy my silence. What changed?" Thomas and Victoria exchanged glances. "The situation evolved," Thomas replied carefully. "Once the federal authorities became involved, we reassessed our approach." "You mean once stealing the artifacts became impossible, you decided to co-opt the discovery instead," Dr. Hamilton translated bluntly. Thomas's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "We prefer to see it as adapting to new circumstances. The offer is genuine, Mrs. Carson. Security for you and your daughter. A chance to share this remarkable discovery with the public with proper funding and infrastructure." "I need time to consider," Elena said, though her instincts were already raising warning flags. "Of course." Thomas handed her a business card. Call me directly when you've decided. But I should mention that our offer is time-sensitive. Development timelines and investment partners create certain pressures. After the Pembrokes departed, Elena turned to Dr. Hamilton. What do you think? The older woman sighed. It's a devil's bargain. The funding and infrastructure would certainly advance the preservation efforts, but the Pembrokes would control the narrative. They'd decide which parts of history are marketable enough to share. And the artifacts would eventually disappear into private collections. I've seen it before. Dr. Hamilton's expression softened. But Elena, I understand the appeal of their offer. Security for Sophie, healthcare, a real home. These aren't small considerations. Elena looked out the window toward their trailer, where she could see Sophie chatting animatedly with one of the young archaeologists, her wheelchair parked beside an excavation site. Her daughter's face was alight with enthusiasm, an expression Elena hadn't seen since before Michael's death. What would you do? She asked quietly. Dr. Hamilton followed her gaze. I can't answer that, but I can tell you that tomorrow morning the president of Emory University is visiting the site. The historical significance of this discovery is generating substantial academic interest, and that often translates to funding opportunities that don't come with Pembroke-sized strings attached. Back at the trailer, Elena found Sophie surrounded by maps and notebook pages, deep in conversation with a woman Elena didn't recognize. Elderly, African-American, with a dignified bearing that somehow transcended her simple clothes and the plastic lawn chair she occupied. Mom, this is Mrs. Gladys Peters, Sophie announced. She lives in trailer number 4, and her great-great-grandmother was a slave at Blackwood Plantation. The elderly woman rose with the help of a wooden cane. Forgive the intrusion, Mrs. Carson. When I heard about what you'd found, I thought maybe my family's stories might help your research. Mrs. Peters brought a Bible with names written in it, Sophie added, pointing to an ancient, leather-bound volume on the table. From 1875. Elena welcomed the woman warmly, immediately recognizing the potential historical value of her family's oral traditions. Over coffee, real coffee that Dr. Hamilton had thoughtfully brought that morning, Mrs. Peters shared stories passed down through generations. My great-great-grandmother was named Mary, she explained, her weathered fingers gently turning the Bible's fragile pages to reveal a family tree inked in fading script. She was 16 when she escaped Blackwood, carrying my great-grandmother, who was just an infant at the time. Family legend says a white lady with storm cloud eyes helped them hide from slave catchers. Catherine Blackwood, Elena breathed, recalling the journal description of a young mother and baby who had passed through the chamber in June 1863. Your ancestors might be mentioned in her journal. Mrs. Peters' eyes widened. You have her actual writings? Yes, and detailed records of everyone who passed through the underground station. For the next hour, Elena and Mrs. Peters compared the historical documents with the family's oral history, finding remarkable correspondences that authenticated both sources. Sophie meticulously recorded everything in her journal, her small face solemn with the responsibility. It's like a puzzle, Sophie observed. Mrs. Peters has some pieces, and we have some pieces, and together we can see more of the picture. That's exactly what historical research is, Elena agreed, struck by her daughter's insight. As twilight approached, Mrs. Peters prepared to leave. My grandson is picking me up for my dialysis appointment, but I'd like to come back tomorrow if that's all right. I have some old photographs that might be of interest. We'd love that, Elena assured her, helping the elderly woman down the makeshift ramp. Outside, the archaeological team was packing up for the day, carefully covering excavation sites with waterproof tarps. The 2 park rangers were being relieved by an overnight security detail, the site's historical significance warranting 24-hour protection. As Mrs. Peters waited for her grandson's car, she grasped Elena's hand with surprising strength. You've done a sacred thing finding this place. My people's stories were almost lost, whitewashed away like so many others. But now, her voice caught with emotion, now they'll be remembered. Their courage, their suffering, their triumph. You gave them back their voice. The simple words struck Elena with unexpected force. In her academic career, history had been something to study, to analyze, to teach. But here, in this unlikely place, history was alive, breathing through Mrs. Peters' family stories, visible in Sophie's wide-eyed wonder, tangible in the brick-lined chamber beneath their floor. After dinner, a proper meal of chicken and vegetables provided by the university support team, Elena tucked Sophie into bed on the couch. Dr. Hamilton had arranged for a real mattress to be delivered, a small comfort that made the dilapidated trailer slightly more livable. "Mom," Sophie asked sleepily, "are we going to take Mr. Pembroke's offer?" Elena smoothed her daughter's dark curls, so like Michael's. "I'm not sure yet. What do you think?" Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to all questions. "I think Catherine wouldn't like him. She hid from people like him, people who want to control things." "That's very perceptive, sweetheart. And I like it here now," Sophie continued. "It's not pretty, but it's important. And Mrs. Peters needs us to tell her family's story right." Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought. Not for the first time. "Get some sleep now. Tomorrow will be another busy day." After Sophie drifted off, Elena descended once more into the underground chamber, bringing only a single battery-powered lantern. After days of scientific examination under bright lights, with cameras and measuring tools and expert analysis, she wanted to experience the space as it might have felt to those who had hidden there, illuminated only by faint, flickering light, wrapped in protective darkness. She sat on the earthen floor, back against the brick wall, and simply breathed. The air was different down here, cooler, damper, with an earthy scent that no amount of time could erase. If she closed her eyes, she could almost hear them. The frightened whispers, the hushed reassurances, the muffled cries of children who couldn't understand why they had to be silent. This chamber had witnessed both the worst and best of humanity, the cruelty that had made escape necessary, and the courage that had made it possible. For a brief moment, Elena felt a connection to all who had passed through this space. Those fleeing bondage, those risking everything to help them, and even Raymond Miller, whose mental distress had manifested as voices from the past. Her fingers found the loose brick where Catherine Blackwood had hidden the gold coins, and she carefully removed it. The leather pouch was still there, its contents untouched. Elena hadn't mentioned this particular discovery to anyone. Not Dr. Hamilton, not the archaeological team, not even Sophie. She wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps because these coins represented something more personal than historical. A direct connection between her and Catherine Blackwood, two women separated by time but united by a secret beneath floorboards. Or perhaps because, in her darkest moments of financial desperation, the temptation to use them for Sophie's needs might prove too strong. Elena carefully replaced the brick, then noticed something she'd missed before. A small carving in the adjacent brick, nearly invisible in normal light but caught now in the lantern's oblique glow. Leaning closer, she made out 3 letters, CB, and beneath them, a tiny etched butterfly, a symbol she recognized from her research as the Underground Railroad sign for safe to proceed on the journey. Catherine Blackwood had signed her work, hidden where only someone who knew exactly where to look would find it. It wasn't vanity, it was testament. "I was here, I did this." I resisted. A sudden noise from above startled Elena from her reverie, a car door slamming followed by voices. Quickly ascending the wooden steps, she emerged from the trap door to find Jenkins in her living room, his face tight with worry. "County inspector's here," he said without preamble. "Says there's been a complaint about unsafe living conditions." Elena's heart sank. "Pembroke." Jenkins nodded grimly. "Gotta be. They're playing hardball now." The county inspector was a thin man with a clipboard and an air of bureaucratic resignation. "Mrs. Carson, I'm Howard Daniels from County Code Enforcement. We received an anonymous complaint about this structure, specifically regarding its suitability for a disabled minor. The threat Victoria Pembroke had made was being executed with clinical precision." Elena felt a surge of anger, quickly replaced by strategic calculation. "Of course, Mr. Daniels. I should mention that this site is currently under federal protection as a potential National Historic Landmark. Perhaps you'd like to speak with Agent Ramirez from the National Park Service before proceeding?" Daniels blinked, clearly not expecting this complication. "Federal protection?" Jenkins jumped in. "Underground Railroad station discovered beneath the floor. National Register application in process. Federal agents on site 24/7. He pointed to the security personnel visible through the window. The inspector seemed to deflate slightly. "I still need to complete my assessment." "Of course," Elena agreed. "But I should warn you that any action affecting the structural integrity of this building could potentially violate federal preservation statutes." As the inspector began his evaluation, meticulously noting every code violation, and there were many, Elena texted Dr. Hamilton about the new development. Within 20 minutes, the historian arrived with Agent Ramirez in tow, both carrying documentation of the site's protected status. What followed was a bureaucratic standoff, with Daniels caught between county regulations he was obligated to enforce and federal protections that superseded his authority. The inspector finally departed with a warning that he would need to consult his superiors about the unusual situation. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Hamilton warned after he left. "Pembroke Development won't give up easily. They'll try every legal and quasi-legal avenue to pressure you." Jenkins, who had remained throughout the confrontation, nodded in agreement. "They've been after this land for years. Thomas Pembroke doesn't take no for an answer." "Why this particular property?" Elena asked. "There's nothing special about this location for retail development." Jenkins and Dr. Hamilton exchanged glances. "You think they knew?" Jenkins asked. "About the Underground Railroad station?" "It's possible," Dr. Hamilton replied. "Thomas Pembroke is known for acquiring properties with historical significance, particularly those connected to the Civil War era." "But how would they know about a station that's been hidden for 150 years?" Elena pressed. "Records," Dr. Hamilton suggested. "Old maps, property transactions, family papers, or maybe just rumors, local legends." Jenkins scratched his beard thoughtfully. "There's always been stories about this place. Nothing specific, just whispers. Haunted, some said. Historical, others claimed." He looked at Elena directly. "My grandfather used to say this land had secrets worth keeping." After Jenkins and Dr. Hamilton departed, Elena checked on Sophie, who had somehow slept through the entire inspection drama, then sat at the kitchen table with Thomas Pembroke's business card in hand. The county inspector's visit was clearly a warning shot, a demonstration of how difficult the Pembrokes could make their lives if Elena refused their offer. $500,000 for archaeological research, a secure job with benefits, proper medical care for Sophie, a real home. All she had to do was cede control of the historical narrative to a corporation that saw the past as a commodity to be exploited. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hamilton. "University president arriving 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bringing grant committee. Hold firm." As dawn broke the next morning, Elena woke to find Sophie already dressed and in her wheelchair, organizing her notes in preparation for the university delegation. The night's rest had done little to clarify Elena's decision, but her daughter's enthusiasm was infectious. "Do you think they'll let me show them the maps I made?" Sophie asked, carefully arranging her drawings on the coffee table. "I'm sure they'd be honored," Elena assured her, amazed yet again by her daughter's resilience. Where Elena saw complications and compromises, Sophie saw opportunities and adventures. By 8:30, the archaeological team had resumed work, and additional university vehicles were arriving, sleek, late-model cars that looked almost as out of place at Riverbank as the Pembroke's luxury SUV had. Dr. Hamilton greeted Elena with barely contained excitement. "President Harlow is bringing the full grants committee, plus the Dean of Historical Studies," she explained. "This level of interest is unprecedented." The delegation arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, a group of distinguished academics led by a tall woman with short silver hair and an air of quiet authority. Dr. Elizabeth Harlow, president of Emory University, greeted Elena with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Carson, what you've discovered here is potentially one of the most significant Underground Railroad finds of the century. We're eager to support its proper preservation and study." For the next hour, Elena led the delegation through the site, explaining their discoveries in the historical context. Sophie charmed the academics with her detailed observations and insightful questions, while Dr. Hamilton provided expert commentary on the archaeological significance. In the underground chamber, President Harlow examined the brickwork with obvious appreciation. "The craftsmanship is remarkable." "And you say Catherine Blackwood's journal provides construction details?" "Yes, along with accounts of those who passed through," Elena confirmed. "We've already connected one family, Mrs. Peters from the trailer park, with ancestors mentioned in the records." "The human dimension is what makes this discovery truly exceptional," President Harlow noted. "Not just the physical structure, but the documented experiences of those who used it." As they emerged from the chamber, Elena noticed a new tension in Dr. Hamilton's posture. Following her mentor's gaze, she saw the reason. Victoria Pembroke stood at the edge of the property, watching the university delegation with barely concealed displeasure. President Harlow noticed as well. "Pembroke Development, I presume?" "Yes," Elena confirmed. "They've made an offer to partner on the preservation efforts." "I imagine they have," President Harlow replied dryly. "Thomas Pembroke has quite a reputation in preservation circles, not a positive one." After the delegation had toured the entire site, they gathered in the small clearing beside the trailer for what President Harlow described as a proposition. Elena felt a flutter of anxiety, all too aware of Victoria Pembroke still observing from a distance. Mrs. Carson, Emory University would like to establish a formal relationship with this site, President Harlow began. We propose a comprehensive preservation and research initiative funded by a special grant from our Historical Studies Endowment. Dr. Hamilton looked like she might burst with satisfaction. The funding would cover complete archaeological documentation, structural preservation, and ongoing research, she added. And my position? Elena asked cautiously. We would like to offer you a role as site historian and research coordinator, President Harlow replied, with appropriate salary and benefits, including health insurance. She glanced at Sophie, who was listening intently. We understand your situation requires certain accommodations. The offer was similar to the Pembrokes in its material benefits, but fundamentally different in its approach. Where Thomas Pembroke had spoken of control and commercial development, President Harlow emphasized research integrity and historical authenticity. What about the land itself? Elena asked, gesturing to the trailer park around them. I'm just renting this trailer. Mr. Jenkins owns the property. We've already discussed preliminary terms with Mr. Jenkins, President Harlow assured her. He's amenable to a long-term lease arrangement that would allow him to maintain ownership while permitting proper development of the historical site. It seemed too good to be true. The perfect solution to both their practical needs and the site's historical integrity. Elena glanced at Dr. Hamilton, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I'm honored by your offer, Elena began, and A commotion at the security perimeter interrupted her response. Thomas Pembroke had arrived, flanked by two men in expensive suits carrying briefcases. Behind them, a county sheriff's deputy stood looking uncomfortable. President Harlow, Thomas called, his voice carrying across the clearing. I wasn't aware Emory had an interest in real estate development. The university president's expression cooled. This isn't about real estate, Thomas. It's about historical preservation. A mutual interest, then? Thomas approached, his manner affable, though his eyes remained calculating. Perhaps we should discuss a collaborative approach. I don't recall Pembroke Development having an academic research division, President Harlow replied. Thomas's smile tightened. We have resources Emory can't match. $500,000 for initial archaeological work alone. He turned to Elena. Mrs. Carson was considering our offer, weren't you? All eyes turned to Elena, who suddenly felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about a bond or health care for Sophie anymore. It was about who would control the narrative of the Underground Railroad station, corporate interests, or academic integrity. Before she could respond, a small voice spoke up. My mom taught me that history belongs to everyone, Sophie said clearly, not just people who can pay for it. A murmur of approval rippled through the university delegation. Thomas Pembroke's expression flickered briefly before settling back into a practiced smile. Admirable sentiment, young lady. But preservation requires resources, substantial resources, which Emory is prepared to provide, President Harlow interjected firmly. Thomas nodded to one of his associates, who stepped forward with an open laptop. Perhaps you should review the county's assessment of this structure before proceeding. According to the inspection yesterday, this trailer has been deemed uninhabitable for minor occupancy. The report specifically cites concerns about a disabled child living in these conditions. The county deputy shifted uncomfortably. I'm just here to deliver the official notice, ma'am, he explained to Elena. You have 72 hours to relocate the minor to approved housing or face potential intervention by family services. The blood drained from Elena's face. This was Victoria's threat made real, using Sophie as leverage to force compliance. She looked at her daughter, whose brave expression couldn't entirely mask her fear. This is outrageous, Dr. Hamilton protested. Using child welfare as a weapon in a property dispute? Not at all, Thomas replied smoothly. We're merely concerned about the child's welfare. In fact, Pembroke Development is prepared to provide immediate alternative housing for Mrs. Carson and her daughter at no cost while this situation is resolved. The trap was elegantly constructed. Either accept the Pembroke's assistance and implicitly their terms for the historical site, or risk losing Sophie to the system while fighting a protracted legal battle they couldn't afford. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. They can stay with me. Gladys Peters stood at the edge of the gathering, her grandson supporting her arm. My unit has 2 bedrooms, properly maintained. Past inspection last month. She looked directly at Thomas Pembroke. Unless you've filed complaints against every trailer in the park? The elderly woman's intervention created a moment of confusion that President Harlow quickly exploited. Additionally, Emory University can provide immediate temporary housing on campus, while Mrs. Carson continues her work here. We have visiting scholar accommodations that are fully accessible for her daughter. Thomas Pembroke's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. A generous offer, but the county's concerns extend beyond housing. There's the matter of financial stability, healthcare access, which would be addressed by Mrs. Carson's appointment as site historian, President Harlow countered, with full benefits and a housing allowance. The standoff continued for several tense minutes, with Thomas Pembroke attempting various angles to reassert control of the situation. But the combined forces of academic authority, federal protection, and community support gradually eroded his position. Finally, with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, Thomas closed his laptop. It seems we've reached an impasse, but I'd caution against celebrating prematurely, Mrs. Carson. Historical preservation is a long, expensive process, and funding priorities can change. He handed her his business card, identical to the one she already had. My offer remains open. When circumstances change, and they will, call me. As the Pembrokes and their entourage departed, Elena felt lightheaded with relief and residual anxiety. Sophie wheeled over to Mrs. Peters, taking the elderly woman's hand with touching gratitude. "Thank you for offering to help us," she said earnestly. "That was really brave." Mrs. Peters patted Sophie's cheek. "Bravery runs in your blood, child. I can see it clear as day." President Harlow approached Elena with a sympathetic smile. "That was unpleasant but not unexpected. Thomas Pembroke doesn't surrender valuable acquisitions easily." She glanced toward the departing convoy of expensive vehicles. "This won't be his last attempt." "I know," Elena acknowledged, "but I think we made the right choice." "I'm certain of it," President Harlow assured her. "Now, shall we discuss the details of your appointment?" I believe we were interrupted at a crucial moment. As the university delegation and Elena moved toward a shaded area to continue their discussion, Sophie remained with Mrs. Peters, the two of them deep in conversation despite their age difference. Elena watched them with a surge of gratitude, her daughter, who had lost so much, finding connection and purpose in this unlikely place. Mr. Hamilton sidled up beside her. "You did well," she murmured. "Standing up to Thomas Pembroke isn't easy." "I had help," Elena pointed out. "Yes, but you set the tone. Catherine Blackwood would be proud." The simple statement affected Elena more deeply than she expected. From the moment she discovered the underground chamber, she'd felt a connection to the plantation owner's wife who had risked everything to help others. What would Catherine have done in Elena's position? Somehow, Elena knew she would have chosen integrity over expediency, courage over comfort, just as Elena had. As discussions with the university proceeded, Elena found herself occasionally glancing toward the woods that bordered the property. Something Thomas Pembroke had said nagged at her, his certainty that circumstances would change, that the university's support might falter. It wasn't just the threat of a ruthless businessman. There had been a specificity to his confidence that suggested he knew something others didn't. Later that afternoon, as the university delegation prepared to depart, Elena pulled Dr. Hamilton aside. "I need to show you something, but it has to remain between us for now." Leading her mentor back into the underground chamber, Elena revealed the loose brick and the gold coins Catherine Blackwood had hidden there. Dr. Hamilton's eyes widened. "My God, Elena, these would be worth thousands at least, maybe tens of thousands to the right collector." Elena carefully replaced the coins in their hiding place. "I haven't told anyone about them, not even the archaeological team." "Why not?" Elena considered the question. "At first, I thought I might need them. For Sophie, if things got worse." She felt a flush of shame at the admission. "But now I'm not sure why I'm still keeping them secret. Instinct, maybe." Dr. Hamilton studied her thoughtfully. "Sometimes instincts are worth trusting. Thomas Pembroke's interest in this site might go beyond its general historical significance. What if he knows something specific is hidden here? Like the coins? Or something else? Something more valuable, either monetarily or historically." Elena recalled Raymond Miller's notebooks, his obsessive documentation of the voices he heard beneath the floor. What if those voices hadn't been random? What if they'd been trying to communicate something specific? A message, a warning, a secret. I need to go through all of Raymond's notes again, Elena decided. And we should expand the search area in the chamber. There might be more hidden caches. As they emerged from the underground chamber, Elena was struck by how dramatically her life had changed in just 4 days. From desperate single mother with 300 to her name, to site historian with university backing and a role in preserving a priceless piece of American history. But as she watched Victoria Pembroke's car still lingering at the edge of the property, Elena knew the battle was far from over. The Pembrokes wanted something specific from this site, something worth millions to them. And people willing to use a disabled child as leverage wouldn't easily abandon their objective. The sun was setting over Riverbank Trailer Park, casting long shadows across the archaeological excavations. Security lights flickered, illuminating the perimeter where federal agents maintained their protective vigil. In the trailer that had become both home and historical landmark, Sophie was showing Mrs. Peters how to document family stories in her leather journal. Elena stood on the rickety porch, watching the interplay of light and shadow across the property. Somewhere in those shadows, Thomas Pembroke's certainty lurked like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. And somewhere in Raymond Miller's scattered notes, or Catherine Blackwood's coded journal entries, lay the key to understanding what made this particular underground chamber so valuable to a man who measured worth only in dollars. As night fell fully over Georgia, Elena thought of all those who had passed through the chamber beneath her feet, scared, desperate, hoping against hope for a better future. Their courage had carried them through darkness toward freedom. Now it was her turn to be brave, to protect not just her daughter and their newfound security, but the legacy of those whose voices had been silenced for too long. Whatever secret the Pembrokes were pursuing, whatever threat they posed, Elena would face it. For Sophie, for Catherine Blackwood, and for all those whose stories deserve to be told. 3 weeks after discovering the underground chamber, Elena Carson stood at the newly installed whiteboard in what had once been trailer number 17's cramped living room. The space had undergone a remarkable transformation. Walls reinforced, roof repaired, proper heating and cooling and installed. What remained of the original trailer was now merely a shell containing a state-of-the-art research facility funded by Emory University's Expedited Preservation Grant. We've mapped 4 distinct tunnel branches, Elena explained to the research team gathered around her. The main passage beneath the chamber leads east toward what would have been the plantation house. The secondary tunnel heads north, likely toward the river crossing Dr. Hamilton identified from Catherine's journal entries. Dr. Margaret Hamilton nodded approvingly from her seat beside Sophie, who was busy updating her own meticulous research journal. In the 3 weeks since the confrontation with Thomas Pembroke, the 6-year-old had become an unofficial mascot to the archaeological team, her wheelchair now equipped with a specialized carrying case for field equipment, a gift from one of the graduate students. "And the third passage?" asked Dr. Williams, the lead archaeologist. "Still unclear," Elena admitted, pointing to a section of the map marked with a question mark. "It extends southwest, but collapsed about 30 feet in. Ground-penetrating radar suggests it continues beyond the collapse, possibly connecting to something beneath what is now the trailer park's maintenance shed. The 4th tunnel is the most intriguing," Dr. Hamilton added, rising to stand beside Elena. "It's narrower than the others, barely wide enough for a single person to crawl through, and it doesn't appear on any of Catherine Blackwood's maps or journals." The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly, the team's collective attention focusing on this new mystery. After 3 weeks of methodical documentation, cataloging, and analysis, the underground chamber had revealed most of its secrets. But this unmarked tunnel, discovered just 2 days ago behind a section of brick that appeared solid until a graduate student noticed a slight difference in the mortar coloration, hinted at aspects of the Underground Railroad network that even Catherine Blackwood might not have documented. "Initial exploration suggests it extends at least 100 yards, Elena continued, but the air quality deteriorates significantly after the first 50 feet, making further investigation dangerous without proper equipment." "Which arrives tomorrow," Dr. Williams confirmed, along with the structural engineers who will assess the collapsed tunnel. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to their various tasks, Elena felt a familiar tug of excitement mingled with responsibility. In just 3 weeks, she had transitioned from desperate mother to respected site coordinator. Her expertise in Civil War history and her personal connection to the discovery making her an invaluable part of the research effort. More importantly, Sophie was thriving. Emory University had arranged for her to attend the campus lab school, where her intelligence and enthusiasm had quickly overcome any barriers her disability might have presented. With proper health care now provided through Elena's employment benefits, Sophie's physical therapy had resumed, and her doctors were discussing new treatment options that had previously been financially out of reach. "Mom," Sophie called from her wheelchair, which now sported a hand-painted nameplate identifying her as junior historian. "Mrs. Peters is here with her grandson. They brought more family photos." Elena welcomed Gladys Peters with a warm embrace. The elderly woman had become a frequent visitor to the site, her family's oral histories providing crucial context for the documented records found in the chamber. Her grandson Michael, whose name sent a pang through Elena's heart each time she heard it, was a quiet, thoughtful young man in his 20s who had recently begun recording his grandmother's stories for a community history project. "I found something you should see," Mrs. Peters announced, carefully removing a wrapped bundle from her tote bag. "My cousin in Savannah sent it when she heard about what you discovered here." Inside the protective cloth lay a small wooden box, its surface darkened with age and repeated handling. With trembling fingers, Mrs. Peters opened it to reveal a collection of items: a faded piece of fabric with geometric patterns, a smooth river stone with a hole bored through its center, and most significantly, a folded piece of yellowed paper. "My family kept these for generations," Mrs. Peters explained. The quilt piece was a coded message. The flying geese pattern told escaping slaves which direction to travel. The stone was a marker left along the path to indicate a safe house was nearby. "And the paper?" Elena asked, carefully unfolding the brittle document. "A pass," Mrs. Peters said softly, "given to my great-great-grandmother Mary when she finally reached Canada. It's dated July 1863, exactly when Catherine Blackwood's journal mentions Mary and her infant son leaving the underground station." The simple document, with its faded ink and official stamp, created an electric connection between past and present. Here was tangible proof, beyond records and journals, that the people who had passed through the chamber beneath their feet had reached freedom, had survived, had continued their family lines into the present day. "This is remarkable," Dr. Hamilton breathed, examining the paper with professional reverence. "A complete provenance from escape to freedom, documented both in the station records and family artifacts." "Mrs. Peters," Elena said, emotion thickening her voice, "would you consider allowing us to create a special exhibit featuring your family's connection to the site? Visitors could follow Mary's journey from slavery to freedom through Catherine Blackwood's records and your family's preserved history." The elderly woman's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "That's why I brought these things. My people's story deserves telling, not just the suffering, but the courage, the hope, the survival." As Mrs. Peters and her grandson shared more family stories with the research team, Elena slipped away to her small office, formerly the trailer's second bedroom. Here, surrounded by carefully organized research materials, she continued her parallel investigation, the one she hadn't fully shared with the team. Raymond Miller's notebooks were spread across her desk, their pages marked with colored tabs indicating references to voices, sounds, and hidden. For 3 weeks, Elena had been systematically analyzing the Iraq veteran's observations, seeking patterns in what he had initially attributed to supernatural phenomena and later to his own mental instability. But Elena had developed a different theory. What if the voices Miller heard weren't hallucinations or ghosts, but actual conversations, somehow audible in the trailer due to some quirk of acoustics? The underground chamber had been ingeniously ventilated, with air shafts disguised as drainage pipes. What if those shafts, or others not yet discovered, created a channel for sound to travel from elsewhere on the property? One entry in particular had captured her attention. April 15th, voices clearest at 2:15 a.m. Man and woman arguing. Couldn't make out all words, but heard documents, proof, and Blackwood fortune repeatedly. Recorder only picks up static. Am I going crazy? The Blackwood fortune. Historical records indicated that Colonel Josiah Blackwood had been one of Georgia's wealthiest plantation owners, with assets including land, slaves, and significant investments in railroads and banking. After Sherman's march through Georgia, much of that wealth had vanished. Plantations burned, investments rendered worthless by Confederate defeat, slaves emancipated. But what if some portion of that fortune had survived? What if Catherine Blackwood, knowing her husband's wealth was built on human suffering, had redirected some of it toward helping those he had oppressed? A soft knock interrupted Elena's thoughts. Dr. Hamilton stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Still working on Miller's notebooks?" she asked, entering the small office and closing the door behind her. Elena nodded. "There's something here, Margaret, something beyond what we've already discovered." Dr. Hamilton settled into the chair opposite Elena's desk. "You think the Pembrokes know about it?" "I'm certain they do," Elena confirmed. "Thomas Pembroke was too confident that we'd eventually need his help. He knows something we don't, something valuable enough to justify their persistent interest in this property." "The gold coins you showed me?" "Maybe. Or maybe something more significant." Elena pushed Miller's notebook across the desk. "He repeatedly mentions hearing discussions about the Blackwood fortune and documents that would provide proof." Dr. Hamilton studied the entry. "This could be hallucination. PTSD can manifest in very specific delusions. Or it could be actual conversations he overheard," Elena countered. "We've found 4 tunnels connected to the main chamber. What if there are others? What if some of them lead to locations still in use?" Before Dr. Hamilton could respond, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Mom, Victoria Pembroke is back. She's talking to Dr. Williams." The two women exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying from the office. Outside, they found Victoria Pembroke engaged in what appeared to be a surprisingly cordial conversation with the lead archaeologist. Sophie watched from a distance, her expression wary. "Mrs. Carson," Victoria acknowledged Elena with a professional nod. "Dr. Hamilton, I was just discussing the structural engineering assessment with Dr. Williams. I wasn't aware Pembroke Development had any official role in our preservation efforts," Elena replied carefully. Victoria smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "We don't, but given our extensive experience with historical restoration, we thought it prudent to offer our expertise regarding the collapsed tunnel, safety concerns and all that." Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable. Ms. Pembroke was sharing some relevant historical documents her company's research team uncovered. Property surveys from the 1870s that might help us understand the original tunnel layout. Victoria handed Elena a leather portfolio similar to the one she'd carried during her first visit. "These are copies for your records. The originals remain in our corporate archives, of course, but we're happy to share information that might advance the preservation effort." Elena accepted the portfolio with carefully concealed suspicion. "How generous." "Pembroke Development remains committed to historical preservation," Victoria replied smoothly, "despite our previous misunderstanding." After exchanging a few more pleasantries with Dr. Williams, Victoria departed, leaving Elena and Dr. Hamilton to examine the documents she'd provided. The portfolio contained detailed property surveys, apparently conducted shortly after the Civil War, when the former Blackwood plantation was subdivided and sold. "These look authentic," Dr. Hamilton admitted, studying the yellowed pages with a professional eye. "And potentially useful. They show structures that no longer exist. Outbuildings, slave quarters, even what appears to be the original plantation house. The question is why the Pembrokes would share them now," Elena mused, spreading the surveys across a research table. After 3 weeks of silence, Victoria suddenly appears with historically valuable documents? What's their angle? Sophie wheeled closer, examining the maps with the serious concentration she brought to all aspects of the research. "Maybe they're trying to be nice now," she suggested, though her tone indicated skepticism. "Or maybe they're trying to make us look in the wrong place." Dr. Hamilton arched an eyebrow. "Out of the mouths of babes. Sophie might be onto something. What if these documents are meant to direct our attention away from something the Pembrokes are actually interested in?" Elena studied the surveys more carefully. "The maps show all 4 tunnels we've already identified, plus 2 more extending from what would have been the main plantation house." She looked up at Dr. Hamilton. "But nothing unexpected, nothing that would justify their persistent interest." "Perhaps that's the point," Dr. Hamilton suggested, "to convince us there's nothing more to find." Throughout the remainder of the day, Elena found herself distracted by Victoria Pembroke's unexpected visit and the historical documents she provided. The surveys appeared genuine and potentially valuable to their research, yet the timing and source made Elena instinctively wary. As evening approached and the research team departed, Elena remained in the underground chamber, examining the brick walls with renewed attention. If there were secrets beyond what they'd already discovered, the physical evidence would be here, in the meticulous craftsmanship of those who had created this sanctuary. Sophie joined her, having completed her homework under Mrs. Peters' watchful eye. "Are you looking for more secret tunnels, Mom?" "Maybe," Elena admitted. "I keep feeling like we're missing something important." Sophie wheeled herself around the perimeter of the chamber, her keen eyes scanning the brickwork. After several minutes of silent observation, she stopped near the corner where the fourth unmarked tunnel had been discovered. "Mom, look at these bricks. They're different." Elena knelt beside her daughter, examining the section Sophie indicated. The bricks appeared identical to the others at first glance, but upon closer inspection, she noticed subtle variations in color and texture. "Good eye, sweetheart. These might be replacements added later than the original construction." "Like somebody closed up another tunnel," Sophie suggested. "Possibly." Elena ran her fingers along the mortar lines, feeling for inconsistencies. "Or maybe concealed something behind the wall." Further examination revealed that several bricks in the section were indeed slightly different from the surrounding masonry. Elena documented their location with photographs, making a mental note to have the structural engineers examine the area when they arrived the next day. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Sophie paused, her head tilted as if listening. "Mom, do you hear that?" Elena stilled, straining her ears. At first, she heard nothing beyond the ambient sounds of the site, the hum of dehumidifiers, the distant murmur of the security team's radio. But then, faintly, she detected what had caught Sophie's attention. A rhythmic tapping, like the distant beat of a hammer. "Where's that coming from?" Elena whispered, irrationally afraid of being overheard. Sophie pointed toward the newly discovered fourth tunnel. "From in there, I think, but it sounds far away." They listened for several minutes as the tapping continued. Regular, deliberate, almost like a code. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped, leaving only silence and questions. "We should tell Dr. Hamilton," Sophie said as Elena helped her up the wooden steps and out of the chamber. "Tomorrow," Elena agreed, though a part of her wondered if the sound would be dismissed as imagination or environmental noise. "Let's see if we hear it again." That night, after tucking Sophie into bed in their temporary university housing, Elena found herself unable to sleep. The tapping sounds, Victoria Pembroke's unexpected appearance, Raymond Miller's notebooks, all swirled in her mind, suggesting connections she couldn't quite grasp. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and drove back to the research site. The night security guard, a former park ranger named Joe, greeted her with mild surprise. "Working late, Mrs. Carson?" "Couldn't sleep," she explained. "Thought I'd review some of the documentation." Inside the transformed trailer, Elena bypassed her office and headed straight for the underground chamber. If Miller had consistently heard voices around 2 to 15 a.m., perhaps there was a pattern, some regular activity that created the sounds. The chamber felt different at night, more immediate, more authentic somehow. Illuminated only by her flashlight, Elena could almost imagine herself back in 1863, waiting in tense silence for the arrival of escaping slaves, listening for the coded knock that would signal their presence. She settled on the earthen floor near the fourth tunnel entrance, switched off her flashlight, and simply listened. The darkness was profound, broken only by the faint glow of emergency lighting at the top of the wooden steps. The silence, too, seemed absolute, until it wasn't. At precisely 2:17 a.m., they heard him in, not tapping this time, but voices. Distant, indistinct, but undeniably human. They seemed to emanate from the fourth tunnel, just as Sophie had suggested. Heart pounding, Elena switched her flashlight back on and crawled to the tunnel entrance. The narrow passage extended into darkness, its rough-hewn walls barely wide enough for an adult to navigate. Safety protocols prohibited entering the tunnel without proper equipment and backup, but the voices compelled her forward. She had crawled perhaps 20 feet when the voices became clearer. A man and woman, their tones suggesting argument rather than conversation. Elena froze, straining to make out words. "I'd told you it's not here," the woman's voice insisted. "It has to be," the man countered. "The surveys clearly show." "A waste of time." "Father will—" The voices faded in and out, as if carried on currents of air through the complex tunnel system. Elena pressed forward a few more feet, desperate to hear more, to confirm what she suspected, that someone else was exploring the tunnel network from another entry point. Suddenly, a beam of light flashed ahead, momentarily blinding her. Elena instinctively retreated, moving as quietly as possible back toward the main chamber. Behind her, the voices had stopped, replaced by the sound of movement. someone or something approaching through the tunnel. Elena emerged into the main chamber just as her flashlight flickered and died, the batteries failing at the worst possible moment. In the dim emergency lighting from above, she scrambled up the wooden steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Joe!" she called to the security guard as she burst from the chamber. "Someone's in the tunnel system." The guard was immediately alert, hand moving to his service weapon. "Stay here," he instructed, calling for backup on his radio as he approached the chamber entrance. Within minutes, additional security personnel arrived, followed shortly by Dr. Williams, who had been working late at the university lab and responded to the emergency call. A thorough search of the accessible tunnel sections revealed nothing. No intruders, no evidence of recent entry, no explanation for the voices Elena had heard. "Could it have been carried sound from elsewhere on the property?" Dr. Williams suggested, clearly skeptical but trying to be diplomatic. "Acoustics in these old structures can play tricks." "I know what I heard," Elena insisted. "Two people, a man and woman, discussing surveys and searching for something." Dr. Williams exchanged glances with the security team. "We'll increase patrols and install additional monitoring equipment in the tunnels," he promised. But without evidence of actual intrusion, his implication was clear. Without proof, Elena's middle-of-the-night encounter would be attributed to imagination, stress, or the power of suggestion after weeks of immersion in the site's mysteries. By morning, the incident had transformed into a minor footnote in the day's activities. The structural engineers arrived as scheduled, focusing their attention on the collapsed tunnel rather than Elena's experience in the fourth passage. Dr. Hamilton, however, took Elena's account seriously. Raymond Miller documented similar experiences, she reminded Dr. Williams during their morning briefing. Voices at specific times, discussing specific topics. The consistency suggests something beyond imagination. "I've requested specialized audio equipment," Dr. Williams conceded. "If there are actual sounds being transmitted through the tunnel system, we'll document them." As the day progressed, Elena found herself increasingly distracted, replaying the fragments of conversation she'd heard. The surveys clearly show. What surveys? The ones Victoria Pembroke had conveniently delivered yesterday? By mid-afternoon, Elena had developed a theory audacious enough that she hesitated to share it even with Dr. Hamilton. What if the Pembrokes had located another entrance to the tunnel system? What if Victoria's delivery of the historical surveys had been cover for exploring the tunnels themselves? The structural engineer's assessment provided unexpected support for this theory. The collapsed tunnel, the one heading southwest toward the maintenance shed, showed signs of recent disturbance. "These timbers were deliberately weakened," the lead engineer reported, pointing to specific damage visible in the photographs. "Someone wanted this tunnel to collapse, and recently within the past few weeks." "Since we discovered the site," Elena concluded, exchanging significant glances with Dr. Hamilton. "We should examine the maintenance shed," Dr. Hamilton suggested. "If the tunnel was heading in that direction." The maintenance shed, a dilapidated structure at the edge of the trailer park, had been largely ignored during the initial investigation, its decrepit condition suggesting limited historical value. Now Elena, Dr. Hamilton, and a small team approached it with renewed interest. Jenkins, who had maintained his role as property manager despite the dramatic changes to his trailer park, met them at the shed with keys and a puzzled expression. "Not much to see," he warned as he warned as he unlocked the padlock. "Just tools and junk mostly." The interior was exactly as Jenkins had described, a cluttered collection of lawn equipment, plumbing supplies, and miscellaneous debris accumulated over decades. The concrete floor was cracked and stained, with no obvious sign of access to tunnels below. "When was this building constructed?" Dr. Hamilton asked, examining the structure with a historian's eye. Jenkins shrugged. "Been here since I bought the place in '80. Previous owner said it was built in the '50s or thereabouts." Elena moved systematically through the shed, tapping the concrete floor with a hammer, listening for hollow spots that might indicate a concealed entrance. Near the back wall, partially hidden by a stack of rusting paint cans, she found what she was looking for, a section that produced a distinctly different sound when struck. "Here," she called to the others. "This area sounds different." With Jenkins' permission, they cleared away the accumulated debris, revealing a rectangular outline in the concrete approximately 3 feet by 4 feet. Along one edge, barely visible beneath decades of grime, were hinges. "A trap door," Dr. Hamilton breathed, "concealed but accessible." It took their combined efforts to break through years of paint and dirt that had effectively sealed the door shut. When they finally pried it open, cool, damp air wafted up from the darkness below, carrying the unmistakable earthy scent that Elena had come to associate with the underground chamber. Flashlights, she instructed, her historian's excitement temporarily overriding caution. The opening revealed a set of metal rungs embedded in concrete, leading down approximately 8 feet to a tunnel that extended in both directions. Unlike the rough-hewn passages connected to the main chamber, this tunnel was lined with concrete and appeared to have been constructed or reinforced much more recently, perhaps during the mid-20th century. Cold War era, Dr. Hamilton suggested, examining the construction. Many old properties were retrofitted with fallout shelters during that period. Someone might have discovered the original tunnel network and modernized a section of it. Which direction leads toward our site? Elena asked, orienting herself. Dr. Hamilton pointed to the left branch. That way should connect with the collapsed section we found. The right branch heads toward the property line and beyond. Further exploration revealed that the left tunnel was indeed blocked by the same collapse they had documented from the other side. The right branch extended at least 100 yards before a locked metal door prevented further progress without proper equipment. This explains how someone could access the tunnel system without entering our secured site, Elena concluded as they climbed back to the surface. And the concrete reinforcement would carry sound efficiently, explaining both the voices I heard and what Miller documented. Jenkins, who had watched their exploration with growing concern, spoke up. Should probably mention, Pembroke Development owns the property that borders mine to the west. Bought it about 6 months ago. Been doing some kind of construction there, but their permits say it's just soil testing. The implications were immediately clear. If the Pembrokes had discovered this access point to the tunnel system from their adjacent property, they could have been exploring beneath the site for months, long before Elena had stumbled upon the underground chamber. We need to secure this entrance immediately, Dr. Hamilton insisted, and document everything before the Pembrokes realize we found it. By evening, the maintenance shed entrance had been properly secured, with monitoring equipment installed in the accessible portions of the tunnel. The discovery had energized the research team, providing tangible evidence that others, presumably the Pembrokes, had indeed been conducting their own clandestine investigation of the site. As Elena updated her research notes that night, a new text message appeared on her phone. Unknown number, but the content made the sender's identity clear. The Blackwood legacy extends beyond bricks and mortar. Some treasures are meant to remain buried. $50K tonight for you to walk away. Reply yes or no. Elena stared at the message, her mind racing. The Pembrokes had escalated from professional negotiation to direct bribery. Whatever they were searching for beneath the site, they were growing desperate to secure it without academic scrutiny. She showed the message to Dr. Hamilton, who had stayed late to help process the new discoveries. Should I respond? Absolutely not, Dr. Hamilton advised. Forward it to Agent Ramirez. This crosses the line from professional competition to potential criminal activity. Elena did as suggested, then continued working, though the message had left her unsettled. The Pembrokes' persistence suggested something far more valuable than historical significance, something worth bribing and threatening for. As she reviewed Catherine Blackwood's journal entries for the 1,000th time, seeking clues they might have missed, a passage caught her attention differently than before. June 10, 1863. Converted the last of the accounts today. Jay would be furious to know his grandfather's gold now purchases freedom rather than human flesh. The documents are secured where only those who seek liberty would think to look. May they serve their purpose long after this cruel war ends. Converted the accounts, documents secured. Elena had initially interpreted this as referring to the gold coins she'd found hidden in the chamber wall, emergency funds for escaping slaves. But what if Catherine had done something more substantial? What if she had systematically diverted portions of the Blackwood fortune to support the Underground Railroad and left documentation that would prove it? Such records would be historically priceless, evidence of reparative justice enacted during slavery itself. But they might also have modern legal implications. If Catherine had redirected family assets without her husband's knowledge, could those transactions still have legal standing? Could there be Blackwood wealth still unaccounted for, still legally tied to Catherine's documented intentions? Elena's thoughts were interrupted by Sophie, who had arrived with Michael Peters for their evening visit. Despite the late hour, Elena's daughter remained an integral part of the research effort. her unique perspective and natural historian's instinct repeatedly proving valuable. "Mom, we heard about the secret door in the maintenance shed," Sophie announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "Did you find treasure?" "Not exactly, sweetheart," Elena replied, setting aside her notes. "But we did find evidence that someone else has been exploring the tunnels." "The bad people?" Sophie asked, her expression turning serious. "The Pembrokes," Elena confirmed. "We think they discovered another entrance to the tunnel system and have been searching for something specific." Sophie considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Like in National Treasure, where the clues lead to hidden treasure?" Michael Peters, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "My grandmother says there were always stories about Blackwood gold. Not just coins, but bars of it, supposedly hidden during the war." "Hidden Confederate wealth wasn't uncommon," Dr. Hamilton acknowledged. "Many plantation owners concealed assets to prevent seizure by Union forces. But typically, those caches were recovered after the war ended." "Unless the person who hid it had other intentions," Elena suggested, thinking of Catherine Blackwood's journal entry. "Michael, has your grandmother mentioned any specific stories about Catherine Blackwood and the family fortune?" The young man nodded. "She says Catherine disappeared after the war, taking something valuable with her. According to family legend, she helped establish a fund for former slaves using Blackwood money." This aligned perfectly with the journal entry Elena had just been reviewing. "We need to speak with Mrs. Peters again," she decided. "Her family's oral history might contain details that aren't in the written records." As if summoned by their discussion, a commotion erupted outside. Raised voices, the slam of car doors. Through the window, Elena saw Thomas Pembroke himself striding toward the research trailer, flanked by two men in suits and Victoria trailing slightly behind. "Sophie, stay with Michael," Elena instructed, moving toward the door with Dr. Hamilton close behind. Outside, security personnel had intercepted the Pembroke delegation, preventing them from entering the secured perimeter without authorization. Thomas Pembroke's face was flushed with barely contained anger. "Mrs. Carson," he called, spotting Elena in the doorway. "I believe we need to discuss recent developments." "All communications should go through our legal team," Dr. Hamilton replied before Elena could respond, especially given the inappropriate text message Mrs. Carson received earlier this evening. Thomas's gaze flickered to his daughter, who had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. "I'm not aware of any text message," he said smoothly, "but I am aware that you've been trespassing on Pembroke property. The tunnel you accessed from the maintenance shed extends beneath land we legally own." "The tunnels were constructed in the 1860s, Elena countered, "long before property lines were redrawn. They're part of the historical site and protected under the same federal statutes." Thomas's expression hardened. "Historical preservation has limits, Mrs. Carson, particularly when it impacts ongoing development projects. Our engineers report that your explorations have destabilized soil on our adjacent property, creating potential safety hazards." "That's simply not true," Dr. Hamilton interjected. "Our structural assessment has been filed with the county," Thomas interrupted, "along with our request for an emergency injunction to halt all subsurface exploration pending a full engineering review." The legal maneuver was clearly designed to delay their research, to buy time for whatever the Pembrokes were searching for. Elena felt a surge of frustration, tempered by the realization that they were growing desperate, making increasingly transparent attempts to obstruct the official investigation. "We'll see you in court then," she replied with more confidence than she felt. "In the meantime, the site remains under federal protection, and all access points to the tunnel system will be secured and monitored." Thomas Pembroke's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Indeed, we'll all abide by the court's decision." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mrs. Carson? I understand you've been experiencing financial hardship since your husband's unfortunate passing. If your position with Emory should prove unstable, my offer remains open. Some would say $50,000 is a small price to pay for a fresh start." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as the Pembrokes departed. Elena and Dr. Hamilton watched their vehicles pull away, both women processing the implications of the confrontation. "They're getting desperate," Dr. Hamilton observed, "which means we're getting closer to whatever they're looking for." "But what exactly is it?" Elena wondered aloud. "Historical documents? Hidden gold? What could possibly justify this level of obstruction?" As they returned inside, they found Sophie and Michael huddled over Catherine Blackwood's journal, examining the entries with magnifying glasses. "Mom!" Sophie exclaimed, looking up with excitement. "We found something. Look at these pages. If you hold them up to the light, there's writing between the lines. Elena took the journal carefully, tilting it toward the overhead light. Sure enough, nearly invisible to casual inspection, additional text had been written in what appeared to be lemon juice or some other organic invisible ink, a common Civil War-era method for concealing sensitive information. My God, Dr. Hamilton breathed, peering over Elena's shoulder. She created a dual record, the visible journal for anyone who might discover it, and hidden messages for those who knew to look for them. Can we read it? Elena asked, her historian's excitement momentarily overshadowing the confrontation with the Pembrokes. Heat should reveal the text, Dr. Hamilton confirmed, but we'll need to be extremely careful with the original document. As they prepared the specialized equipment needed to safely examine the hidden writing, Elena couldn't help but wonder if they had finally discovered what the Pembrokes were so desperately seeking. Catherine Blackwood's true legacy, hidden in plain sight for over 150 years, waiting for the right person to reveal it. Whatever secrets the invisible text contained, Elena was certain of one thing. Catherine Blackwood hadn't intended for them to enrich developers or disappear into private collections. She had concealed them to protect something valuable, something worth preserving at all costs. The battle for the underground chamber had evolved into something far more complex than historical preservation. It had become a race to uncover Catherine Blackwood's final secret, a truth powerful enough to provoke threats, bribes, and legal manipulation a century and a half after it was first hidden. As night settled over the research site, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. Catherine Blackwood had risked everything to help others escape bondage. Now it was Elena's turn to ensure that sacrifice wasn't forgotten or exploited. Whatever the hidden text revealed, she would honor its original purpose, just as she had promised from the moment she first descended those wooden steps into history. The laboratory was silent except for the soft hum of specialized equipment and the collective held breath of everyone gathered around the examination table. Elena, Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Williams, and two document preservation specialists from Emory's Rare Manuscripts Department watched intently as Catherine Blackwood's journal was carefully exposed to gentle heat, revealing the hidden text written between the visible lines. "It's working," whispered Dr. Abernathy, the lead preservation specialist, as faint brown letters began to emerge on the yellowed page. "Lemon juice, just as we suspected, a common Civil War-era invisible ink." Slowly, Catherine Blackwood's secret record materialized, a parallel narrative that transformed their understanding of the underground chamber and its purpose. The first revealed passage sent a ripple of excitement through the assembled researchers. April 3rd, 1863, the transfer is complete. 37,000 in gold bullion, 12,000 in currency, and the Georgia Western Railroad bonds have been secured in the secondary vault. Josiah suspects nothing, believing the assets lost in the Charleston banking collapse. May God forgive my deception, though I cannot regret it. This blood money, earned through generations of suffering, will now serve a higher purpose. 37,000 in gold, Dr. Williams breathed. That would be worth millions today. The secondary vault, Elena echoed, her mind racing. That must be what the Pembrokes are searching for. Not just historical artifacts, but actual gold, still hidden somewhere in the tunnel system. Page by page, Catherine Blackwood's hidden journal entries revealed an extraordinary tale of financial subversion. While maintaining the appearance of a loyal Confederate wife, Catherine had systematically diverted portions of the Blackwood fortune, selling assets, liquidating investments, and converting the proceeds to gold, which she then concealed in a purpose-built vault connected to the Underground Railroad chamber. Most significantly, she had created legal documentation transferring ownership of these assets to a trust benefiting those formerly held in bondage on Blackwood lands and their descendants. The documents had been properly notarized and filed with sympathetic officials in Philadelphia, creating a legitimate legal claim that could potentially be enforced even in modern courts. June 17, 1863, the final documentation is complete and has been entrusted to Thomas for safe passage north. Duplicate copies remain sealed in the iron box within the vault. Should Providence allow this cruel war to end with justice, these papers will ensure the wealth of Blackwood Plantation serves those who truly earned it through generations of unpaid toil. As more of the hidden text emerged, they discovered detailed instructions for locating and accessing the secondary vault, a chamber constructed beneath what had once been a spring house approximately 50 yards from the main plantation building. That would place it somewhere near the current property line, Dr. Hamilton calculated, consulting the historical surveys Victoria Pembroke had provided, possibly beneath land the Pembrokes recently acquired. Which explains their urgency, Elena concluded. If they found historical records indicating the existence of this vault and its contents, they would need to recover it quickly before our investigation discovered the same information, Dr. Hamilton finished. Gold bullion has no provenance. Once removed from its historical context, it simply becomes anonymous wealth. Elena studied the revealed instructions carefully. According to Catherine's notes, the vault can only be accessed through the fourth tunnel, the narrow passage we discovered behind the brick wall. The entrance is concealed by a mechanism that requires a specific sequence to unlock. Like a 19th century combination lock, Dr. Williams suggested, professional excitement temporarily overriding the ethical implications. Remarkably sophisticated for the era. Dr. Hamilton's expression remained grave. The question now is whether the Pembrokes have already located and accessed the vault. Their legal maneuvers might be attempts to prevent us from discovering the theft has already occurred. There's only one way to find out, Elena decided. We need to follow Catherine's instructions and try to access the vault ourselves. The timing was critical. Thomas Pembroke's emergency injunction would be heard in court the following morning. If granted, it could halt their subsurface exploration for weeks or months. More than enough time for the Pembrokes to extract whatever remained in the vault without oversight or documentation. After ensuring Sophie was safely settled at their university apartment, under Mrs. Peters' watchful eye, Elena joined a specialized team assembled for the expedition. Equipped with proper safety gear, communication devices, and imaging equipment, they entered the fourth tunnel shortly after midnight, following Catherine Blackwood's detailed directions. The narrow passage extended deeper than their previous explorations had reached, eventually opening into a small chamber that bore clear signs of recent disturbance. Boot prints in the dust, modern tool marks on the ancient bricks, empty water bottles pushed into a corner. Someone had been working here, and recently. The Pembrokes beat us to it, Dr. Williams concluded, examining the disturbed area. Maybe not entirely, Elena countered, studying Catherine's instructions. She describes a mechanism hidden behind the third brick from the corner at shoulder height. Careful examination revealed the brick in question, slightly different in color from those surrounding it. When pressed in a specific sequence described in the journal, a section of the wall swung inward with a grinding protest of long-dormant hinges. Beyond lay a small chamber lined with iron plates, Catherine Blackwood's secondary vault. The space had indeed been breached, with clear evidence of recent entry. But contrary to their fears, the vault was not empty. While sections had been cleared, suggesting items removed, a significant portion of the original contents remained. Stacks of gold bars, yellow documents and protective oilcloth, and a large iron box that matched Catherine's description of the one containing the trust documentation. They haven't finished, Dr. Hamilton realized, surveying the scene. They've been removing the contents gradually, probably to avoid detection. Elena approached the iron box with reverent caution. Unlike the gold bars, which bore no identifying marks, the legal documents inside would have clear historical provenance, making them impossible to remove without detection once properly documented by the research team. The box was sealed with a simple but effective lock, which yielded to careful manipulation. Inside, precisely as Catherine had described, lay a bound collection of legal documents, the duplicate copies of the trust she had established in Philadelphia. The pages were remarkably well preserved, protected from humidity and decay by the airtight iron container. June 19, 1863, Elena read from the first page. This trust, established by Catherine Marie Blackwood, transfers ownership of the herein described assets to benefit those persons formerly held in bondage on Blackwood plantation lands and their lawful descendants in perpetuity. My God, Dr. Hamilton breathed. She created a reparations trust in 1863 with legal documentation that could potentially still be enforceable, which would make Mrs. Peters and her family the rightful owners of whatever remains of the Blackwood fortune, Elena concluded, including the gold the Pembrokes have been secretly removing. They documented everything meticulously: the vault, its remaining contents, the evidence of recent disturbance, and most importantly, the legal documents establishing Catherine Blackwood's trust. By dawn, they had created a comprehensive record that would be difficult for even the Pembrokes' expensive lawyers to challenge. "We need to secure the remaining assets," Dr. Williams insisted as they prepared to exit the tunnel system, "and inform law enforcement about the apparent theft of the gold that's already been removed. And we need to contact Mrs. Peters," Elena added. "As a direct descendant of Mary, who is specifically named in these documents, she has a legal right to know about this discovery." They emerged from the underground chamber into chaos. The research site was swarming with county officials, uniformed deputies, and stone-faced men in suits who identified themselves as representing Pembroke Development. Thomas and Victoria Pembroke stood in the center of the activity, Thomas projecting confident authority while Victoria watched with calculating eyes. "Mrs. Carson," Thomas called, his voice carrying across the site, "I'm afraid your unauthorized excavations have come to an end. Judge Harmon issued an emergency temporary restraining order at 6 a.m. All subsurface exploration is suspended pending full engineering review." Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Hamilton, both women acutely aware of the iron box Dr. Williams carried, tangible evidence of what the Pembrokes had been secretly extracting from beneath the property. "Perfect timing, Mr. Pembroke," Elena replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We've just completed a rather significant discovery that I believe will interest the authorities." Thomas's smile faltered slightly. "All artifacts remain in place until the engineering review is complete. Judge's orders." "These aren't artifacts," Elena countered, nodding to Dr. Williams to open the iron box. "These are legal documents establishing a trust that appears to still be valid. A trust that makes the descendants of Blackwood Plantation slaves the rightful owners of certain assets, including gold bullion that someone has been removing from a vault beneath this property." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Thomas Pembroke's confident demeanor cracked, his face flushing with barely contained fury. Victoria stepped forward, clearly attempting damage control. "Any subsurface artifacts are subject to proper archaeological protocol," she insisted. "Our company has been fully transparent about secretly accessing the tunnel system from your adjacent property," Dr. Hamilton interrupted. "About removing gold bars from a sealed vault, about concealing historical documentation that establishes legal ownership of those assets." One of the county deputies moved closer, his professional interest clearly piqued. "Is there evidence of theft, ma'am?" "Documented evidence," Elena confirmed, "including photographs of the vault showing recent disturbance, modern trash left behind by the intruders, and comparison with Catherine Blackwood's records of what should be present." Thomas Pembroke's recovery was impressive, his lawyer's training evident in his rapid pivot. "These are serious but completely unfounded allegations. Any exploration Pembroke Development conducted was on our own property, following all legal protocols. If historical assets were discovered, they would naturally be properly documented and preserved." "Then you won't object to a full investigation," Elena suggested, "including a search of Pembroke properties for the missing gold bars." The standoff might have escalated further if not for the arrival of a new participant. Mrs. Gladys Peters, accompanied by her grandson Michael and a distinguished older man in a tailored suit, approached the gathering with dignified purpose. "Mrs. Carson," she called, "I hope we're not too late. This is Mr. James Washington from the Southern Poverty Law Center. When you called about the trust documents, I thought we might need legal representation." Mr. Washington stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. "I understand historical documents have been discovered that may establish a valid trust benefiting the descendants of enslaved persons from Blackwood Plantation. As counsel for Mrs. Peters, I request immediate protection of those documents and any associated assets." The dynamic shifted palpably. What had been a property dispute between researchers and developers transformed into something far more significant, a potential landmark case involving reparative justice for slavery with the moral weight of history behind it. The county officials, clearly recognizing the explosive nature of the situation, deferred to state authorities, who in turn involved federal representatives given the historical significance of the site. By mid-morning, the research trailer had become command central for a multi-agency response, with Elena and Mrs. Peters at its center. Thomas Pembroke had retreated to confer with his legal team, while Victoria remained on site, her expression unreadable as she watched the proceedings from a distance. "The trust documentation appears legally sound," Mr. Washington confirmed after examining the papers. "Properly executed, notarized, and filed with authorities in Philadelphia." There's precedent for the enforcement of such instruments across generations, particularly when the intent is clear and specific errors can be identified. And the gold? Elena asked. Evidence of its removal constitutes potential criminal activity, he replied. But more importantly, it establishes a pattern of deliberate concealment that strengthens Mrs. Peters' claim to whatever remains. Mrs. Peters herself seemed overwhelmed by the implications. All these years, my family kept the stories alive about Mary's escape, about the white lady with storm cloud eyes who helped her. But we never imagined. Catherine Blackwood wasn't just helping people escape physically, Elena said gently. She was trying to ensure economic justice as well. She understood that freedom without resources was an incomplete liberation. As the morning progressed, a makeshift legal and historical command center took shape. University experts, legal scholars, and government officials converged on the site, drawn by the unprecedented nature of the discovery. The temporary restraining order that Thomas Pembroke had secured was quickly superseded by federal protection of the site as evidence in a potential criminal investigation. By noon, search warrants had been issued for Pembroke development offices and the adjacent property where they had accessed the tunnel system. Elena, exhausted but determined, provided detailed statements to various authorities, explaining the historical context and the significance of Catherine Blackwood's actions. "Where's Sophie?" she asked Dr. Hamilton during a brief lull in the questioning. "Still with Michael at your apartment. I've been keeping them updated." Dr. Hamilton smiled tiredly. "Sophie said to tell you she knew Catherine was extra special brave all along." Elena felt a surge of longing to hold her daughter, to share this moment of vindication with the one person who had believed in the importance of their discovery from the very beginning. "Once things settle here, I need to see her." "Of course. The authorities have what they need from you for now." Dr. Hamilton hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. Victoria Pembroke asked to speak with you privately. She's waiting outside." Elena's surprise must have shown on her face. "I told her it was entirely your decision," Dr. Hamilton continued. "No one would blame you for refusing after everything they have done." Elena considered the request. Victoria Pembroke had been central to the attempts to seize control of the site, to threaten Elena's custody of Sophie, to undermine the research effort at every turn. Yet something about her had always seemed slightly out of alignment with her father's methods, as if she were following a script rather than acting from conviction. "I'll talk to her," Elena decided, "but not alone. I'd like you to stay with me." Victoria Pembroke waited by the perimeter fence, her designer outfit incongruous against the muddy research site. As Elena approached, she noticed something she hadn't before, a vulnerability beneath the polished exterior, a tension that suggested internal conflict rather than simply thwarted ambition. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Victoria began, her usual confident tone subdued. "I imagine it's the last thing you want to do right now." "Why did you ask to see me?" Elena replied, bypassing pleasantries. Victoria glanced at Dr. Hamilton, then back to Elena. "Because I owe you an explanation. Not an excuse, there isn't one, but at least the truth about why we pursued this site so aggressively." She took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. "My father found references to the Blackwood Vault in old family papers about a year ago. Initially, his interest was purely historical. Pembroke Development has always acquired properties with historical significance. But when research suggested the vault might contain actual gold, he saw an opportunity," Elena finished. Victoria nodded. "The company is in trouble, overextended on several major projects, investors threatening to pull out. The gold represented a solution, untraceable assets that could save Pembroke Development from bankruptcy." "At the expense of the rightful heirs," Dr. Hamilton noted coldly. "Yes." Victoria didn't attempt to justify it. "I didn't know about the trust documentation that Catherine Blackwood had legally transferred ownership. I thought it was simply abandoned Confederate wealth, legally salvageable under treasure trove laws." Elena studied the younger woman carefully, searching for deception and finding instead what appeared to be genuine regret. "When did you find out the truth?" 2 weeks ago. I discovered additional family papers that mentioned the trust explicitly. I confronted my father, but he—" Victoria's composure faltered momentarily. "He said it didn't matter, that no court would enforce a 150-year-old document benefiting the descendants of slaves, that we needed the assets more than they did." "But you disagreed," Elena guessed, remembering the argument she'd overheard in the tunnel. "I'm a lot of things, Mrs. Carson, but I couldn't be part of that." Victoria's gaze was direct now, her corporate mask momentarily lowered. "I was raised to believe in Pembroke excellence, in winning at all costs. But this crossed a line I didn't know I had until I reached it. So you what? Developed a conscience mid-theft? Dr. Hamilton asked skeptically. I tried to slow the operation down, to find a compromise that would preserve the historical record while salvaging the company. Victoria smiled thinly. My father didn't appreciate my sudden ethical concerns. Why tell us this now, Elena pressed. Your father's legal team will certainly try to discredit all of this. Because it's over. Victoria's tone was matter of fact. The evidence you've found, combined with what authorities will discover at our offices, is insurmountable. Pembroke Development won't survive this scandal. She reached into her purse and extracted a thumb drive. This contains inventories of everything removed from the vault, including dates and current locations. It won't make amends, but it might help recover what rightfully belongs to Mrs. Peters and her family. Elena accepted the drive cautiously, still wary of deception. Why would you incriminate yourself and your company this way? Victoria looked past Elena toward the research site, where Catherine Blackwood's legacy was finally emerging after 150 years of darkness. Because she was right, she said simply. Catherine Blackwood understood something my family never did, that wealth built on suffering carries a moral debt that must eventually be paid. After Victoria departed, Elena and Dr. Hamlin returned to the command center to turn over the thumb drive to investigators. The site hummed with activity, archaeologists documenting the vault, legal experts examining the trust documents, security personnel establishing enhanced protection of the perimeter. Do you believe her? Dr. Hamilton asked as they watched Victoria's car disappear down the gravel road. I'm not sure, Elena admitted, but the information will be verified before anyone acts on it. If she's telling the truth, the Peters family could recover millions in assets. Dr. Hamilton shook her head in wonder. A reparations trust established during the Civil War, still legally enforceable today. It's unprecedented. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Mom, Mrs. Peters says we're on TV. Are you finding more treasure? Despite her exhaustion, Elena smiled. I need to go see Sophie. Will you be all right here? More than all right, Dr. Hamilton assured her. This is the kind of discovery historians dream about. Go be with your daughter. We'll manage the circus here. By the time Elena arrived at their university apartment, the story had indeed made national news. Sophie and Michael Peters were watching wide-eyed as reporters discussed the Blackwood Reparations Trust and its potential implications for similar claims across the country. Mom! Sophie launched herself from the couch into Elena's arms, wheelchair forgotten in her excitement. You found Catherine's special treasure, and it belongs to Mrs. Peters. Elena held her daughter close, feeling the tension of the past 24 hours dissolve in the simple joy of their reunion. We did find it, sweetheart. And yes, Catherine Blackwood made sure it would help the families of the people who were forced to work on the plantation. Just like in her journal, Sophie said wisely, she was pretending to be one thing, but really being another, braver thing the whole time. The insight, so simple yet profound, reminded Elena yet again why Sophie had connected so deeply with this project from the beginning. Her daughter instinctively understood what had taken Elena years of academic study to grasp, that history wasn't just about facts and dates, but about human choices, human courage, and human legacy. As the day progressed into evening, updates arrived regularly from the research site. Federal agents had recovered substantial evidence from Pembroke Development offices, including documentation of the gold they had already removed from the vault. Victoria's thumb drive had indeed provided accurate information, allowing for the rapid recovery of most of the missing assets. Thomas Pembroke had been taken into custody on preliminary charges of theft, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. Victoria, while under investigation, was cooperating fully with authorities. Her decision to provide evidence against her father and the company, possibly influenced by self-interest, but nevertheless crucial to the recovery effort. Most significantly, preliminary legal analysis suggested that Catherine Blackwood's trust was indeed enforceable. The documentation was meticulous, the intent clear, and the beneficiaries traceable through both written records and oral history. Mrs. Peters and other identified descendants of Blackwood plantation slaves stood to inherit assets potentially worth millions, a belated economic justice that Catherine Blackwood had envisioned but could not have guaranteed. What happens to the underground chamber now? Sophie asked as they prepared for bed that night, the excitement of the day finally giving way to exhaustion. It will be preserved as a historical site, Elena explained, tucking the blankets around her daughter. Even more important now that we understand its full significance, Catherine Blackwood wasn't just helping people escape to physical freedom. She was trying to ensure they had resources to build new lives. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. She was thinking about the future like you do for me. The simple comparison caught Elena off guard, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. From the moment she discovered the underground chamber, she had felt a connection to Catherine Blackwood. Two women separated by time but united by purpose. But she hadn't considered the most fundamental similarity. They were both mothers trying to secure a better future for those they loved. I suppose that's true, Elena acknowledged softly. We both want those we care about to have what they need to thrive. And we both found it in the same place, Sophie pointed out with impeccable six-year-old logic. Our last $300 brought us to Catherine's treasure, like she was waiting for us. As her daughter drifted to sleep, Elena sat beside the bed, contemplating the extraordinary chain of events that had led them to this moment. From desperate poverty to the center of a historical discovery with modern legal implications. From a rusted trailer with a rotted floor to the unveiling of a 150-year-old act of moral courage and financial subversion. Catherine Blackwood had risked everything, her marriage, her social standing, potentially her life, to redirect the fruits of injustice toward a measure of restitution. She had created not just a pathway to physical freedom through the Underground Railroad, but a foundation for economic empowerment that might finally be realized a century and a half later. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hamilton. You need to see this. Catherine's hidden text revealed her final entry, coming to you now. 20 minutes later, Dr. Hamilton arrived with photocopies of the newly revealed journal passage, Catherine Blackwood's last recorded thoughts before she disappeared from historical record. April 9th, 1865, word has reached us of Lee's surrender. This long nightmare may finally be ending, though the work of true justice has only begun. Josiah rages against the inevitable, but I feel only relief. Soon I need no longer live this double life. The records are complete, the trust established, the vault secured. What was stolen through generations of bondage has been returned, in small measure, to those from whom it was taken. It is not enough, can never be enough, but it is what one woman could accomplish against the tide of history. Perhaps someday someone will discover what I have done here. Someone who understands that beneath the floorboards of our brutal history lies the possibility of redemption. Not through forgetting, but through reckoning. Not through denial, but through restoration. To that future person, whoever you may be, I entrust this record and this mission. The key to the vault is beneath the third brick from the left corner, marked with my initials. The combination is the birthdate of my youngest son, Daniel, who even now does not understand why his mother must leave everything he has known. May God forgive what I could not change, strengthen what I managed to begin, and guide those who will continue this work long after my name is forgotten. Elena traced the faded words with her finger, feeling the weight of Catherine Blackwood's final testimony. The plantation owner's wife had not simply helped a few individuals escape. She had attempted, within the severe constraints of her time and position, to address the fundamental economic injustice of slavery itself. She was writing to you, Dr. Hamilton said quietly, watching Elena's reaction. Across 150 years, she was hoping someone like you would find this place, understand its significance, and complete what she started. Not just me, Elena replied, looking at her sleeping daughter. All of us. Mrs. Peters and her family. Sophie. Everyone who believes history isn't just about documenting the past, but about repairing its damages. Outside their window, the lights of the university campus glowed steadily in the Georgia night. Somewhere beyond those lights, the underground chamber waited, no longer a secret refuge, but a public testimony to both the darkest and most hopeful aspects of American history. Catherine Blackwood's final mission, entrusted to future generations, had finally emerged from darkness into light. And Elena Carson, who had arrived with nothing but $300 and a desperate hope for shelter, had become the unlikely instrument of its fulfillment. The Georgia sun bathed the Catherine Blackwood Historical Center in golden light as visitors gathered for its official dedication ceremony. Where a dilapidated trailer park had once stood, a thoughtfully designed complex of buildings now housed one of the most significant Underground Railroad sites in the country. The original underground chamber remained preserved in situ, accessible through a carefully constructed entrance that protected its historical integrity while allowing visitors to experience the space where so many had sought freedom. Elena Carson stood at the podium, her professional attire a far cry from the desperate woman who had arrived with $300 and a wounded child a year earlier. As she surveyed the assembled crowd, historians, government officials, descendants of Blackwood plantation slaves, and members of the local community, she felt a moment of profound gratitude for the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this day. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered audience, I was a single mother with nothing but hope and determination. My daughter, Sophie, and I came to this place seeking simple shelter, the most basic of human needs. What we found instead was purpose, a connection to history that would transform not only our lives, but our understanding of justice across generations. In the front row, Sophie sat proudly in her wheelchair, which now bore an engraved nameplate, Sophie Carson, Associate Junior Historian. Beside her, Gladys Peters watched with dignified emotion, her hands clasped in her lap as if in prayer. At 92, Mrs. Peters had become the living embodiment of Catherine Blackwood's legacy, the direct descendant of Mary, whose escape through the underground chamber had been documented in both written records and family oral history. Catherine Blackwood understood something profound, Elena continued, that freedom without resources is an incomplete liberation. That justice requires not only acknowledgement of wrong, but tangible restitution. Her creation of a legal trust for the benefit of those who had been enslaved on Blackwood Plantation was unprecedented, a vision of reparative justice conceived in 1863 that has finally been realized in our time. The legal battle over the Blackwood Reparations Trust had been resolved 6 months earlier, with a landmark ruling that affirmed its validity across generations. The recovered gold, valued at approximately $7.3 million, had been placed in a modern trust benefiting the identified descendants of Blackwood plantation slaves, over 200 individuals located through intensive genealogical research. Mrs. Peters, as the most direct descendant specifically named in Catherine's documentation, had been appointed lead trustee. Her first decision had been to allocate a portion of the funds for the creation of the historical center where they now gathered, ensuring that the physical site and its story would be preserved for future generations. This center is not merely a museum, Elena explained, gesturing to the buildings around them. It is a living classroom, a research facility, and a monument to courage that manifested in many forms. Catherine Blackwood's moral courage in defying the conventions of her time, the physical courage of those who fled bondage, risking everything for freedom, and the generational courage of families like the Peters, who preserved their stories even when the broader culture sought to erase them. Dr. Margaret Hamilton nodded approvingly from her seat among the university representatives. As academic director of the research facility, she had guided the scholarly interpretation of the site, ensuring that the historical narrative remained centered on those who had sought freedom rather than those who had granted it. Today, we dedicate not just these buildings, but a commitment to truthful history, Elena continued, a history that acknowledges both grave injustice and remarkable resistance, a history that recognizes how the past continues to shape our present and how understanding that connection empowers us to create a more just future. As Elena concluded her remarks, Sophie wheeled forward to join her at the podium. Together, mother and daughter unveiled the center's cornerstone, a simple marble plaque bearing words from Catherine Blackwood's final hidden journal entry. Perhaps someday, someone will discover what I have done here. Someone who understands that beneath the floorboards of our brutal history lies the possibility of redemption. Not through forgetting, but through reckoning. Not through denial, but through restoration. The ceremonial ribbon cutting followed, with Mrs. Peters given the honor of the first cut. As the elderly woman severed the blue silk, a bell tolled, the freedom bell that Sophie had envisioned, cast from bronze and inscribed with the names of all those documented to have passed through the underground chamber. The formal ceremony complete, Elena moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and responding to questions from reporters. The story of the Blackwood Reparations Trust had captured national attention, sparking renewed discussions about historical accountability and the ongoing economic legacy of slavery. While some had criticized the court's decision to honor such an ancient claim, the meticulous legal documentation Catherine Blackwood had created proved difficult to dismiss. Thomas Pembroke had ultimately pleaded guilty to reduced charges of evidence tampering and obstruction of justice, receiving a suspended sentence and substantial fines. Pembroke Development had filed for bankruptcy, its assets liquidated to satisfy creditors in legal judgments. Victoria Pembroke, after providing crucial evidence against her father, had disappeared from public view, reportedly relocated to Europe to rebuild her life away from the scandal. "Mom, it's time," Sophie called, drawing Elena away from a conversation with the governor's representative. "Mrs. Peters wants to show everyone the new interactive exhibit." Elena followed her daughter into the main exhibition hall, where a state-of-the-art digital display allowed visitors to trace the documented journeys of those who had passed through the Blackwood Underground Railroad station. Using Catherine's records and modern historical research, the exhibit mapped escape routes, highlighted safe houses, and connected past journeys to present communities. "This is Mary's path," Mrs. Peters explained to the gathered officials, her finger tracing a route from Georgia through the Carolinas and eventually to Canada. "My great-great-grandmother carried her infant, my great-grandmother, through swamps and forests, hiding during day, traveling by night." Catherine Blackwood's journal records that she arrived at the underground chamber with the baby severely ill. They remained hidden for nearly 2 weeks while the child recovered. The digital display illuminated each stage of Mary's journey, including modern photographs of locations where descendants had settled. The final image showed Mrs. Peters herself surrounded by 5 generations of her family, the living legacy of one woman's desperate courage and another woman's moral awakening. "What most people don't realize," Elena added, joining the presentation, "is that Catherine Blackwood didn't just provide temporary shelter. She created detailed medical records of treatments provided to those who passed through, using her privileged access to physicians' knowledge to care for people who had been systematically denied health care." As the official tour continued, Elena found a moment to slip away to the preserved underground chamber. Now properly reinforced, ventilated, and illuminated with lighting designed to mimic 19th century conditions, the space retained its powerful emotional impact. Elena descended the wooden steps, reconstructed but following the original design, and stood in the center of the brick-lined room where it had all begun. The chamber had been carefully restored to its 1863 condition, with reproductions of period items placed according to Catherine's descriptions. The original artifacts, including the journals, medical supplies, and personal items left by those passing through, were preserved in the center's climate-controlled archive, with select pieces rotated through secure display cases. "I thought I'd find you here," Dr. Hamilton said softly, joining Elena in the chamber, always returning to where it started. Elena smiled at her mentor and now colleague. "It still feels sacred somehow. Even with all the changes, all the visitors, there's something about this space that demands reverence. Because it witnessed both the worst and best of humanity," Dr. Hamilton suggested, "extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary courage side by side." Their contemplation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the wooden stairs. Sophie appeared, making her careful way down using the special handrails installed to accommodate her developing mobility. After a year of intensive physical therapy, funded by Elena's position and comprehensive healthcare benefits, Sophie had begun taking short walks with supportive braces, though she still relied on her wheelchair for longer distances. "Mrs. Peters is looking for you both," she announced. "The university president wants to discuss the expansion of the research program." The past year had brought remarkable changes for both Elena and Sophie. With stable employment, proper medical care, and a supportive community, they had flourished. Elena's position as historical director of the center had evolved into a joint appointment with Emory University, including teaching responsibilities and research opportunities. Sophie had advanced 2 grade levels in school, her natural intelligence finally receiving the support and stimulation it deserved. They had moved into a modest but comfortable home near the university campus, though Sophie insisted on regular visits to Mrs. Peters, who had become a surrogate grandmother. Their relationship with the elderly woman and her extended family had grown beyond professional connections to genuine friendship, united by their shared commitment to preserving and honoring the legacy of both Catherine Blackwood and those she had helped. As they climbed the stairs to rejoin the dedication festivities, Elena paused at the threshold between the underground chamber and the modern center built above it. The symbolism wasn't lost on her, the darkness of history connected to the light of contemporary understanding, the buried past informing a more conscious present. "Mom," Sophie said, taking her hand, Do you think Catherine Blackwood knows what happened? That we found her secret and made sure it helped people like she wanted? Elena considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think she hoped someone would. That's why she left the journals, the documentation, the trust paperwork. She created a bridge across time, waiting for someone to discover it. And we did, Sophie said with satisfaction, with our last $300. With our last $300, Elena agreed, squeezing her daughter's hand. Outside, the freedom bell tolled again, its clear tone carrying across the grounds where Blackwood Plantation had once stood. Visitors moved between the various buildings of the complex, the museum, the research center, the community education facility. School groups listened attentively as guides explained the historical significance of the site. Families traced their connections to those who had passed through the underground chamber. Researchers documented, analyzed, and interpreted the continuing revelations from Catherine Blackwood's records. As Elena and Sophie emerged into the Georgia sunshine, Mrs. Peters waved to them from beneath the shade of a young oak tree, one of hundreds planted across the property in a living memorial to those who had been enslaved on Blackwood land. Each tree bore a small plaque with a name from Catherine's records, creating a forest of remembrance that would grow stronger with each passing year. "There you are," Mrs. Peters called. "Come see what Michael has created for the children's education program." As they joined her, Elena reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From desperate poverty to meaningful purpose. From historical discovery to contemporary justice. From a rotting trailer floor to a national landmark. The underground railroad station beneath Blackwood Plantation had been constructed to guide people from bondage to freedom, from danger to safety, from despair to hope. 150 years later, it had served that purpose once more, creating a path forward not just for Elena and Sophie, but for hundreds of descendants whose ancestors had passed through its brick walls seeking liberty. Catherine Blackwood's hidden message across time had found its intended recipients. Not just Elena, who had discovered the physical chamber, but all those who now committed themselves to remembrance, to reckoning, and to the ongoing work of restoration. The treasure beneath the floorboards had never been just gold. It had been truth, buried but not destroyed, hidden but ultimately revealed. A truth powerful enough to change lives a century and a half after it was first concealed in the Georgia earth, waiting for the right moment and the right hearts to bring it finally into the light.